Here I am freaking you out, right?
Well, the internet is magical. Like, I could probably get it out of my email, you know?
Yeah.
So I think we'll be okay.
I'm just gonna save this to my desktop for a second.
Alright. Yeah, when my son was in kindergarten, he was like, I think it was kindergarten. He had this teacher that like assigned him all the jobs, and then he was called like the tech expert.
Oh, really?
It's really cute, and then I think it gave him more
Yeah,
confidence. He's like,
yes,
I'm good
I
at
love
this,
that.
you know?
That's what Marissa does. Her son is 16 now, and he does all their tech stuff.
Really?
He's just like, Mom, give it to me. Marissa has a 3-minute rule with like anything.
I had to have the high school kids help me the other day.
And what?
I had to have the high school kids help me the other day
Yeah.
when they were like,
I know, they
presenting.
know everything, but they don't know how to drive.
Well.
One of them almost hit me, like, coming across Pleasant Street. I'm like, I am obeying the traffic signals. I pushed the button, I waited for the little walkie guy, it said walk now. This kid comes flying down High Street and just hangs a left, like, missed me by that
Oh
much.
my God.
I saw him going by, I'm like, buddy,
Yeah, they don't pay attention.
they don't pay attention to anything.
Uh-oh, scary.
It's me, jaywalking from here on out, let me tell you.
I'm a big fan of jaywalking. I don't think not even really a crime. I forget where I read that recently, but
You're not first, are you?
yes.
Yes.
Oh, perfect.
I'm
gonna take a copy of these.
I know, there's like 5 of them.
Oh, really?
Mm-hmm, yeah. There's like, after you, let's see. There is K-9 Adoption Center. He's doing a presentation for public services, health rights, and then Damien and Drew are giving a very interesting discussion about, hey, sir.
Hi.
About paving and sidewalks. How are you guys?
Well, how are you?
Good, very good.
We've been on many Zooms of late, but.
I know.
Yeah, finally.
Oh my gosh, I've never actually seen
Yeah.
either of these gentlemen in person. I just
Yes.
realized that.
Oh.
'Cause
Rob,
thank
Stefo.
you. 'Cause
All
I
right,
feel like I
Jessica.
didn't know so
Jessica?
well. Yes, Jessica.
my brother and his family.
Went down
all
to
live
the
here.
abuse.
My brother's students, so the rest of the students.
Intake.
Oh, yeah.
You know, they give.
Laura.
Yeah, I have a.
on what to
Do you have anything that you need to present?
No, please. Everybody does. I like all of them, but do you?
Yeah.
Actually, a funny story about her.
Might get
Well,
your fingers. You have a funny story about me?
I was gonna ask, we were talking about.
Yes.
So you retired?
I'm still in my garden.
I did try. That's probably better. That's nice of you. Yeah, I do.
You're live now, I can't turn it back. So all these mics are live, it's going out. Be careful what you say.
It did come through. I did not get anything. I just got a text that said.
I'm glad you're still in.
I will. You want to share a chair with me?
Side by side or?
I'll take yours.
There's a knee right now.
I think
You just don't know where we put the name.
Hey, how you doing?
You look tired.
I don't recall, so you should probably try to.
One got scared.
That's what I got.
Christine? Emily was. You eating dinner?
Yeah, I cut that off. I was like, cool. Then it's
No, just sit there.
So what I did.
Take where I used to.
I have did.
I often have not very many.
I really appreciated
Lifted
that.
them off several. I recently cleaned out my desk, but then I forgot.
Oh, yeah.
I
I didn't, I hadn't seen that until out moving. And Don, yeah, well, I did not respond to that.
Good. Joe?
Can't see you over there.
All right. Call this meeting to order. This is the Morgantown City Council Committee of the Whole meeting, October 25th. The time is 7:06 p.m. As a reminder, Committee of the Whole meetings of Morgantown City Council are intended to provide an opportunity for council to receive information and ask questions and identify policy options in an informal setting. No official action will be taken at this meeting. The following matters are scheduled. First, we have a number of presentations this evening. First being Morgantown Riverfront Revitalization Task Force, Jessica McDonald.
Hi, everyone. I'm Jessica McDonald, chair of the,
The clicker's right above it.
thank you. Looks self-explanatory. Chair of the Morgantown Riverfront Revitalization Task Force. Mayor Celine and Bill Kowecki are steadfast members of our task force, and Jenny asked me recently to come and present to you some of the things that we've been working on. Just to give you a bit of background about the task force, it came about several years back, I believe in 2017, through some funding that the Northern Brownfields Assistance Center at WVU had through a program called River Towns. And the idea behind that program was to get communities to focus on the riverfront as an asset for community and economic development. So they created this task force, convening a bunch of interested stakeholders throughout the city. We've got members from City Council, Bow Park, Mon River Trails Conservancy, Friends of Deckers Creek, Main Street Morgantown, the Morgantown Area Paddlers, Sunny Side Up, the Upper Mon River Association, and WVU, of course. So the idea behind this task force is to convene stakeholders to advise city management on riverfront revitalization. And unlike a lot of other boards that are created by the city, we are not officially appointed by council. It's a more informal group. We don't manage a budget or anything. But we have found, as we assessed what we've been doing over the last few years this summer, that we actually have been making slow and steady progress. And so I just wanted to come and share that progress with you. So when I came on as chair, it was early 2020, just before COVID hit. And Emily and I had been participating in the task force for a while by that time, and so we got together and tried to think of what we wanted to do in order to move things forward. So we decided to sort of start with a reassessment at that point, which is something that I'm sure the group did when it first started, but I wasn't around back then, so we thought it was time to go for it again. So we gathered at the riverfront, probably 15 to 30 of us, wearing our masks, of course, because it was scary at that point. And we used forms created from that River Towns program to assess what was going on at the riverfront. So we started at Hazel Ruby McQueen, and we walked all the way down to the park at the dam with our forms in hand and sort of determined what's good, what's bad, what's here, what could be here. And then I took all of that information and compiled it and started to see some themes emerging. So from that, our group determined what our vision for the riverfront is. And that's a vibrant, multi-use riverfront that offers a variety of amenities, is accessible to visitors, and is frequently used by a wide cross-section of the community. And so then we also put together some goals. We wanted to make sure that this was a space that everyone could enjoy, that there were a variety of different reasons that would make you come to it, that people knew that it existed and could easily get to it, and that we offered signage to highlight what was there once you arrived. We also at that point put together a list of 13 concrete recommendations, which we sent to city management. And these were things that we saw as pretty doable, even in the light of reduced staffing and funding during COVID. And so then we just started trying to make progress on those. So I'll share with you a little bit about how that went. One of my favorite parts of doing this is the public art, and we've made some really good steps on that front. In the bottom left corner is a mural that is now in Mountaineer Heritage Park. One of the first things I did on this task force with Ella Belling, who's at the Mon River Trails Conservancy, is to present to the Public Urban Landscape Commission, there we go, to ask permission to put this mural in Mountaineer Heritage Park, which is the run next to the lock and dam. There were these remaining brick structures there that had been left over from a project before, and they had decided to tear those down because they didn't have anything on them anymore. But when we walked through the park, we realized that they were very much intact, and we thought it was an opportunity to repurpose. So that mural is something that Debbie Palmer, who's with Bow Park, worked with community members to do during COVID. A whole bunch of different people made individual mosaic tiles, and then she compiled them all into this mural, which Bow Park then later installed. It looks really cool. You have to check it out if you haven't already seen it. On the other corner of your screen at the bottom right is the All About Town mural. That one used to be in Hazel Ruby McQueen Park and was removed during the renovations. Bow Park then relocated it to Mountaineer Heritage Park. So now we have two new art features there in a park that was previously just primarily green space. So that's cool. Bottom middle of your screen is one of the most recent murals put together through the city. Vincent Kitch did this one. This is an Ann Tarantino mural that's under the Westover Bridge. And the idea with this one is to add some more life to the area surrounding Hazel Ruby McQueen to build on all of the good things that are happening there. On the top of your screen is the latest edition. This is an Eddie Spaghetti mural. It's on the back of the Hugert's building. Ella Belling spearheaded this one. She holds an event every year in the Wharf District, an arts market event, and she has music there, and she got really tired of seeing how decrepit it looked there, so she just made this one happen. Eddie Spaghetti was out there at night with his projector painting so he could see the lines, and it looks really nice. So our task force is called the Morgantown, but we include Star City too, because Mary Wimmer is a very active participant. She's with the Morgantown Area Paddlers. So this is a little bit about all the stuff that she has helped to get done in Star City. They have put a lot of effort into their riverfront park. She gets teams of volunteers out there. They did a complete new landscaping. They have an awesome kayak launch. Recently, they put art on the poles that's next to the kayak launch. And they have a lot of interpretive signs as well about the history of the area. We've also made some good progress on the environmental front. The organization that I was previously with, the West Virginia Land Stewardship Corporation, we got an EPA cleanup grant to work on the parcel that you probably recognize in the Morgantown Industrial Park with the 4 giant smokestacks. That one had some environmental damage from a bomb facility that was left over from World War II. And that project is still in progress, but we have already put $500,000 and more money is coming to finish that cleanup. And that will eventually be returned to the industrial park owners, and they will put an offloading facility there that will streamline sort of the in and out loading of materials for businesses that are in the park. Another cleanup grant also was obtained recently by MUB. They are going to be cleaning up the Dinsmore Tire Facility, which is next to their other buildings on the south side of the trail. It's where Coben Creek comes into the Mon. That's exciting because that parcel looks really terrible. Also the environmental implications, but even in addition to that, MUB doesn't think they're going to need that for probably another 20 years. They sort of bought it in advance of when they might need to expand. So there's talk of their willingness to consider some sort of recreational use in the interim there. I don't know exactly what that will look like or what possibilities there are, but it's nice to hear that they're open to it. So the bottom left photo there is also of a MUB building. It's very hard to get a good photo of it, but they put in a really cool rain garden there next to their building. Yeah, and the plants look great, and it's really nice to see something pretty and bright on that part of the trail. Bottom right of your screen is a photo of the ubiquitous trash that collects behind the dam every year. Emily has been working really hard at getting a contract in place with a company that has a contraption to gather up that trash and remove it. So we are going to be really excited to see that happen, especially with our efforts in the park that's next to it. The middle photo is sort of showing you how we don't quite see that there's a river behind the entrance to the Mon River trails. And one of the things that we noticed as we walked the riverfront that day was that we want to know that there's a river there. That's part of the appeal of having the trail and the businesses along the river. So we had this idea that we might selectively cut some trees, not the big pretty sycamores or anything, but the trashy invasive species trees, to open up the view shed in certain locations. We know this is something that businesses are interested in because we've seen them take it upon themselves to do that. Oliverios cut a lot of stuff in front of their location at one point, and it's kind of grown back in the way that invasive species do. So we ended up finding, through total coincidence, that there was some money available through some forestry programs with the state to combat the spotted lanternfly, which likes to host in Tree of Heaven. We applied for a grant after consulting with the tree board, the Urban Landscape Commission, the city. Robin has put in an application for a grant for that, which we did not get. But in good news, the city has decided to allocate its own funding to that, and they are hired All Star Ecology to do a 3-year invasive species treatment program. So they're going to do the whole length of the river from the park to the other park to the dam over a period of 3 years, so that they get in there and do it correctly. They're well aware of, like, we want to keep the bank stabilized. We want to make sure that we're doing what needs to be done in a responsible way. So we're really excited to see that coming. I probably don't need to tell you there's a lot of good stuff happening at Hazel Ruben McQueen Park now, and this is just a wonderful addition to what we've been trying to do. It was so nice to see how many people came from all across town to convene there this summer. One of the members of our group is a former DNR employee, and he's got a lot of expertise in fisheries, so he's sort of helped us think about that aspect of things. We know that a lot of people are using the river for fishing. Some spots are officially marked as options, and some are just informally created. He and some volunteers went down and cut brush along those informal paths to make it safer to get down. The bottom right picture is what it used to look like, but Bow Park got out and cleaned that up so that it was not being overgrown by weeds when you try to access the river. We tried really hard to redo the signs that exist on the riverfront from where MUB is telling people to be careful of combined sewage overflow points after storm events. They're big, bold red letters, and we thought they were kind of alarmist. MUB was willing to work with us. We even designed a new sign. Unfortunately, when we got to the DEP folks, they were not in favor of that, so they remain as they are. But this is something that's still on our mind. We are well aware of the public perception that the river water is not clean. People are afraid to get in it. It's something that we would really like to address. And it's a tricky thing, though, because while I think from an ecological standpoint, the river is much improved and it's pretty healthy, from a MUB water treatment standpoint, it also looks good. There aren't heavy metals. There aren't like disturbing things coming from development up the river, which I know from a friend who's at Downstream Strategies and is regularly testing. But there is fecal chloroform in the water coming from the goose population and probably from those CSOs. So it's not a clear path to telling the public it's pretty safe, but sometimes it's not. But we want to think about how to do that and try to find a way, because it really is pretty safe, except for those times when you've had a giant storm event and you got that sewage overflow coming in. So that's on our radar. Let's see, we also worked on, we found out, I think, through no fault of our own, that some no-wake signs needed to be installed on the riverfront. That was something that was statutorily mandated and is now, the city is in compliance with. We worked on bike rack placement, the type of bike racks. We reconvened the bike board so that they could advise us on how that should go when Hazel Ruben McQueen was being redone. This is a photo of the new Reynolds building. It has a nice ramp right down to the rail trail, so we're integrating that new facility, which has I think a workout space in it. Now the students can also access the trail really easily from it. So just trying to integrate those assets together. We also spent quite a lot of time with the idea of adding some assets to Mountaineer Heritage Park. This was something that was almost pie in the sky when we first presented ideas to the city. We thought, oh, let's throw in some climbing boulders there. But then Bow Park let us know that the folks at the WVU's Outdoor Economic Development Collaborative had ideas for the park too. And so we started working with them. They wanted to put in some bike skills tracks to kind of fill the gap in town for beginners who are just learning to ride. A lot of the mountain bike trails that we have are really technical and hard for people just getting started. So we collaborated with multiple groups, including a lovely intern who prepared these visuals. We have an area for adults to sit as their kids play on the boulders, go on the tracks. We presented this to Bow Park and got approval. Another big component of it is a bridge that would cross Don Knotts from the park up into the First Ward neighborhood, really trying to continue with the connection aspect of connecting all the towns, the neighborhoods, making things walkable and bikeable. We have not gotten funding for this yet, but Robin Hess has worked on it, has put in several grant applications. So it's not happening yet, but it is something that we would like to see happen in the future, and we are going to continue pressing forward with. And then we've got a lot of great things happening with kayaks on the river. We've got at least 4 kayak launches. We've got a new kayak locker facility, so you can come, store your kayak, go into town, get something to eat. And then the new rental facility opened up this summer in a soft opening, and West Virginia adventure program presented to us about that recently, and I feel like they're being really thoughtful in how they're trying to roll that out. They're bringing in a lot of resources from throughout the university to try to make sure it's a success. Business plans, etc. So, in terms of what we're looking for next, I think we are interested in continuing to look for ways to add those amenities that I mentioned. We'd really love to see some integrated signing that helps make the connection between downtown and the Wharf District. I know this is something that the city has a plan for and has had one for a while. I've heard talk that it might be coming back around, and we would love to see it and participate in that if it does. And then we're going to continue to look for ways to raise awareness about the assets the riverfront has to offer, the water quality issue I mentioned. And so I don't come to you with any sort of official ask or anything tonight, except that you just keep these concepts in your mind, and as you see opportunities to move these things forward, we would love to be a part of it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Does anyone have any questions or comments for Jessica?
Thank you for the presentation. Wonderful.
Thanks.
Thank you. Our second presentation this evening is the Monongalia County Canine Adoption Center and Animal Control Director Dana Johnson.
Hi.
Hello.
I don't know, it's been a long time since I've been to a city council meeting. So my name's Dana Johnson. Hi, Ryan. I've been with the Canine Center for 22 years. I'm the director of the dog wardens, and we also have an adoption program over at the Canine Center as well. I don't have a presentation. Carol had just asked to see if maybe I would come and, tell you what we do. A lot of you may not know. We have a contract with the city. We provide our dog warden services for the city of Morgantown, and every call that we get, the city of Morgantown is charged for. I don't know what the charge is. That's something that Renetta takes care of. That's not, the financials are not really for me. It's law enforcement. It is public safety and public health is really what we do at the Canine Center. I have 6 full-time dog wardens. I have 2 7 a.m. to 3:30. I have 2 from 3 to 11:30 p.m. and I have 2 from 10:30 p.m. until 7 a.m. in the morning. So I have 24-hour round-the-clock dog wardens Monday through Friday. Weekends after 10:30 p.m. on Friday until 10:30 p.m. on Sunday, my dog wardens are only called out on emergency calls. And that's 1 dog warden per weekend, so they rotate. When they are called out on an emergency call, a police officer has to be present. That is because it is a single police officer, a single dog warden. We do not carry guns, we do not carry tasers, we do not carry batons. So we have to have a police officer present when there's only 1 person being called out on the weekends. And unfortunately, usually on the weekends, it's pretty bad calls. They really only call us if it's bad calls. We also have an adoption program, which we're real thankful for that the commission has allowed me to have for the whole entire 22 years I've been there. So we basically, the dog wardens, if they get called out, they go out, they pick up a stray dog. We also investigate humane and cruelty for the police departments, Westover, Star City, Morgantown, and the county, the sheriff's department. We investigate all of those humane or cruelty calls, and if we gather enough evidence that we feel that it's prosecutable, then we call a police officer in, and then they then take that humane case over and decide whether they want to press charges. We do not have arresting power, therefore we just investigate for them, and then they decide if that case is something that they want to pick up and take to prosecution. I will say that I work very closely with the prosecutors at the Justice Center. Unfortunately, it seems that our humane and cruelty cases are increasing greatly. So far this year, they've gone up about 38%, and that's huge. That's huge. I don't know why that's happening. I don't know if that's COVID. I don't know why it's really happening. If we just have more people here, if we have more people that are aware and they're not afraid to call and turn people in. Well, anyway, so that's the yucky stuff of my job, but unfortunately that's mostly what I do. I help keep my dog warden straight with the laws. They have a lot going on for only 6 of them to do the entire county. And it seems a lot of people have pets now. You know, it's a lot more than it used to be 20 years ago. I will say our numbers have come down. Our euthanasia rates have come down regularly every year for about the past, 10 years, except for this year. Everything has just changed. It's just changed. Our adoption program, we do have a little application process for people that come in to adopt. We make sure that their leases, if they are renters, they're allowed to have a pet. We also check their vet references too. We didn't used to do that, but now we have to do that. We've been seeing a lot of returns, and it's just time that we made a change. Our adoption fees are $125 for dogs. They are spayed, they are neutered, they are vaccinated with their DHLPP, their first HCP for felines. They get a wormer, they get flea treated. I mean, they get treated really well at our place. And cats are $85 and dogs are $125 to adopt. So I'm trying to kind of just skim over. I don't have a presentation like I said, but basically it's probably going to be easier if you guys have any questions. There's been a lot going on. You see in the paper, there's all kinds of things always. Most of the stuff that we deal with doesn't go to the papers. But I know that you've probably seen stuff. So if you have any questions about anything, I'm willing to answer anything you have.
Okay. Does anyone have?
Could you give us a sense of numbers in terms of like how many case calls you get per month and how many dogs you can handle through the adoption program?
Well, case calls, I know that Carol has that as far as the city of Morgantown. I don't have a whole how many calls that I take in a year, but we do try to split it up. City of Morgantown, Westover, Star City. We have contracts with some we don't. So I can't give you a number as far as how many calls we get because I wasn't really prepared for that. But I can tell you how many animals that we had got in last year and kind of the statistics and how it's kind of gone. In 2021, our live intake, which means animals came into our facility alive, we took in 1,333. Now, that's great compared to 3,129 in 2003. So that we took in 3,129 animals in 2003. 2021, 1,333. 2020 was even better. We only took in 1,116. Again, I believe that COVID has a lot to do with this. So out of that 1,333, 864 animals were either adopted or picked up by their owner. 469 were euthanized. So 469 is horrible and we don't like it, but 2007 we euthanized almost 2,000. So we're making leaps and bounds slowly. It's baby steps. I've known this forever. It just is the kind of thing that takes time and education and awareness. And now we have a spay neuter clinic, which is going to be amazing for our whole entire county and our numbers. As far as calls, we take a lot of calls. I can't give you a definitive number, but a lot of calls. We field through a lot of the calls. A lot of the calls are just people calling saying they have a dog running loose in their yard, or they say that they've picked up a dog and they'd like someone to come pick it up. Sometimes bad things, dog attacks, dog bites, and then the humane cruelty, stuff like that. But we do take a lot of calls. My guys are very busy. I have, including myself, I have 5 euthanasia technicians at the Canine Center. And euthanasia is something that nobody wants to talk about, but it's reality, and it's hard. And I think that if I had an hour and a half to talk to you or 2 hours, we could discuss all kinds of things that you would find very interesting. But I invite every one of you to come to the Canine Center. Come and visit us. Come and see what it's all about. We have a beautiful facility now. We took all of our donation money. Year before last, I saved up about $17,000 in donations over the 22-year period for the most part, and we bought new cat cages that are walk-in cat cages. They're condos. They're fantastic. And I'd be happy to talk with any of you if you want to come in and visit and give you a tour and let you look around. We are very busy. I have been at work today since 7 o'clock this morning, and I am here with you. I haven't been home yet. So excuse the way I look, or maybe even smell, but but we are busy, and it seems this year it's really just like I said. We've already taken in more this year than we did last year. So,
About how many dogs or cats do you have space for at any given time?
Comfortably, I have 13, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13 kennels for dogs. And these kennels can house 3 to 4 dogs per kennel. But for some reason now, I don't understand why, but we are getting a lot of dogs that fight with other dogs. So that has reduced. You know, I'm lucky to be able to get 2 per kennel now because it seems like we've got a lot of dogs that fight with other dogs. Didn't used to be that way, and I don't know why that has changed either. I'm wondering if it's because people were home for COVID and those dogs were used to being at home and not being around other dogs or around other people, and then people went back to work, or people couldn't afford it, and then they come to me. So comfortably, I'm going to tell you, you know, in a perfect world, I could get 4 dogs per kennel for 13 kennels. Cats, I can probably house comfortably, I would say 30 to 40. 50 if they're kittens. So that's about what we can house comfortably.
Mayor?
On the issue of cats, lots of people seem to have programs and try to help with neutering cats that are out in the environment and trying to decrease the birth rate, which I'm all for. But where are we as a city and where are we as a area as far as our cat population on the rise, level? I assume on the rise, but.
I wish I could tell you that. I don't know how many cats are out there, but I take in 5 to 25 cats a day from this year from about May until about now. A lot of those are kittens, okay, and sometimes we'll take in, we just did a call this year with we removed 124 cats from one home in Granville in a single wide trailer. Those cats had never been outside. So I don't know, but you know what, Jenny? I'm going to tell you that we have a cat problem.
I have observed that.
We have a cat problem in Mon County, in the whole entire county.
Yeah.
And the true way to probably help correct that problem is laws, but with laws comes more enforcement, and with more enforcement comes more employees, and I don't think that's going to happen.
And more intrusive on people's.
Oh, yes. I mean, this is the one thing in 22 years I've tried to wrap my head around to try to make a difference for cats. But it's really gonna take a lot of work. It's gonna take laws. They would have to pay property taxes in order for us to treat them as we do dogs. There's just so much. And there's a lot of groups around town that are passionate about having the feral cat colonies around town or in different places. And I don't want to say anything to make anybody mad, but I think that these feral cat colonies need to be better controlled. I get very upset because I've said from the beginning every cat that's in a cat colony should have a microchip. That way if they come to my place, I can microchip them and I know if they have a current rabies vaccination. To me, rabies is one of the most important things in this county. It's one of the most important things that I enforce. And my dog wardens, every time they go to a home, whether your dog did the attacking or the other person's dog did the attacking, everyone in that whole situation is going to show my dog warden a rabies vaccination that's current. And if they don't, each party's going to get a ticket. So a policy that we have at the K-9 Center that I implemented years ago is that when we go on scene, if your dog and somebody else's dog is there, my dog wardens request what is required by state code, a current rabies vaccination. It's the only vaccination that's required by state code because it can be fatal and it's a public health and safety issue. So they go and they cite, but we do give every person, unless you're a reoccurring offender, we give every person 14 to 30 days to provide us with a current rabies vaccination, and we will tear that ticket up and not turn it in. On the 31st day, that ticket goes, it gets turned in. Because it's that important to me. It's the one thing that, for public health and safety, that can kill us.
And last question, I need to move on. How long is a rabies shot good for in a cat? How
The
long in a
first
dog?
vaccination usually is 1 year. And then if you get the second vaccination on time, it's good for 3 years. So if you get that second vaccination for your animal before the first one expires or close to it, then it's good for 3 years. It's amazing how many people don't have rabies vaccinations on their dogs. And a lot of people don't even realize that it's the law. So,
Thanks.
yeah.
Could you, first off, thank you for coming in and
Sure.
talking with us.
Thanks for
Could you
inviting me.
just speak a little bit on leash laws?
Sure. There's a leash law in all of the county, which means your dog cannot run off your property. It doesn't mean that a dog has to remain on your property tied on a leash. What it means is your dog cannot leave your property. Once it steps off of your property onto a sidewalk, street, or someone else's property, you are breaking the law. Your dog is running at large.
Is that not the same for felines?
Oh, there's no laws on felines. The only state code that we have for cats is that anyone who owns a cat is supposed to have a current rabies vaccination.
More so is like when people walk their dogs, they're supposed to have a leash, right?
Yes, absolutely.
That was more.
So people on rail trails that are letting their dogs walk beside them, illegal. If you're out in your, now dog parks, that doesn't hold true. Dog parks, you can go in without a lead. But anywhere that you have your dog in the county has to be on a lead. Yeah, unless you're hunting. That is provided in state code, so.
Thank
An
you.
exception.
Does anyone else have any other questions for Ms. Johnson?
No?
All right.
All right.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
We
Thank
appreciate
you.
you
Appreciate
being
it. Come
here.
see us sometime.
I will.
Yeah. I hate to be rude, but I'm going home.
No. By all means.
That's not rude, that's practical.
Our third presentation of the evening is Republic Services, Tom Berry, the General Manager.
Hello, I actually have a handout if I can just drop it
Absolutely.
off.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, so in the handout, obviously the first couple pages kind of cover a little bit more background about Republic Services, what the company is, but the purpose of kind of meeting today is focusing on the last 2 pages of that handout. As we've been working with the city manager's office for the past several months, working on an addendum to the current extension of our contract for all waste and recycling services for the city. There's a couple of larger changes that are going to be completely new that we're kind of working through the details on. So obviously wanted to take this opportunity to kind of discuss specifically what these 3 larger changes are and kind of talk about the ins and outs of them as we kind of finalize the details of that contract as we work it out. So the first major change that we're going to be implementing or looking to implement is a dedicated web page aimed at improving and expanding the communication from our local office to all residents and commercial businesses and everybody within Morgantown. So within this web page, it is a direct link web page that anybody can dial in on any normal internet connection. There's going to be a lot of focus on the recycling information. Obviously, that's been a big push in the last several years with Recycle Right Morgantown. Doing audits, we'll put a lot more feedback on that, kind of transforming a lot of the data that's currently in Recycle Right Morgantown onto this page, and then kind of expanding on that. There's always been a lot of misinterpretation on essentially what happens with recycling once it gets picked up from curbside homes. So kind of outlining this is where it gets brought to, this is where glass products turn into that come out of Morgantown, paper products, plastics, things like that. So detailing that process a little bit more. Again, the biggest challenge with recycling always comes down to just the general education of it, what can and can't be recycled. Those audits that Vanessa has put together have improved the recycling contamination enormously. We do want to continue that one way or another, either internally on our side, to continue that process going forward. I can say our contamination rate coming out of the city of Morgantown residents is better than 95%, which is probably the best municipality for recycling contamination that we pretty much have in the region right now. So a lot of that has to do with the efforts that we put towards that education. So continuing that is going to be a big platform on that website. In addition to that, there's going to be a lot more communications around just our normal waste communication in regards to changes in schedules. People can actually search up their address and give them a function that shows them what day their service would be. Better education and communication around holiday delays or weather delays. Obviously, winter impacts a lot of different our accessibility of getting around to the city. And we have multiple different plans on how we kind of handle that throughout the year. But there's always been a break in communication of what we're trying to accomplish and getting that feedback and kind of closing that loop. So there's going to be a portion that's going to be dedicated to that, as well as just a general contact sections of if you want to schedule an e-recycle pickup at your home, which takes place on the last Friday of every month. Typically, the current process is people just call the office, and Carol takes the call and forwards it off to us, and we put it onto our schedule. We're going to be automating that, so that can all just be live streamed through the website to go direct into our routing with confirmation, as well as additional communication channels. So if you wanted to replace your cart or get a new recycling cart or have a service issue or a specific question, there's going to be more of a straight line communication, so it doesn't have to go through the city manager's office and then communicated through several emails and phone calls where things don't disseminate the right way. So a big focus on those sections on communication, which has always been a challenge, specifically in the past several years, of getting across of where our issues are, and if there are any, and where we need to put our time for it. And then obviously we'll put a special events and newsletter of different things that are happening locally, and just kind of anything that would benefit. So it will be managed from our local office, so it can be adapted. We'll kick it off with probably a general pilot and then adapt it as time goes on for that website. So the second larger change is going to be recycling drop-off events. So if you're not familiar, we actually have a localized transfer station. So all of the waste from recycling that's picked up in Mon County as well as Morgantown gets all brought over to Morgantown Industrial Park, about 2 miles from here, where we have a facility there that essentially takes in all the waste and the recycling. It gets inventoried, weighed, inspected, and then trucked up to our landfill up in Wheeling, West Virginia, and then the recycling goes up to Connellsville, Pennsylvania. So one gap, and this is more targeted towards our single-stream recycling. So single-stream recycling in Morgantown hovers right around 50% on average throughout the year. And there's always been a big push of more people wanting to recycle. But if you don't live in, a single-family home or somewhere you have a direct access to recycling, that's always been a challenge of how do we manage that being number one. And two, we can't just put bins at the bottom of a high-rise and expect everybody to understand how to handle the contamination the right way, which has always been a big challenge. So what we're working through now is introducing kind of a routine drop-off schedule that'll be open for all Morgantown residents. It would just be proof of residence, and we'll work out a way when it comes to students as well that obviously don't have license changes with utility bills or something. We'll work those details out, but on routine Saturdays, either once a month or once a quarter, somebody can come after our transfer station closes between the hours of 11 a.m. and like 3 p.m., and we'll have a special staff on site. And they just confirm that they're a resident in Morgantown. They can drop off their single stream recycling as well as their e-recycling products. And this will give us a chance not just to collect the additional recycling material that is often being missed on that opportunity, but also kind of re-educate people as they're coming through the gate, kind of giving that one-on-one interaction of people pulling in, showing us what they want to drop off, and then making those corrections sight on scene. So it, again, reduces the amount of contamination going into the recycling stream, and also boosts the participation coming up from our e-recycle, where people can recycle anything from CDs to laptops to phones to anything like that, which participation has always been historically low. One, based on communication, and two, based on accessibility. So we're going to be introducing those, which hopefully should boost up a lot of that. The final larger change is going to be the introduction of residential waste carts. So this is 96-gallon carts. So if you're familiar with the smaller green carts that we currently have for recycling, those I think are 65-gallon. These are obviously a little bit larger than these. You can see it at some of the commercial businesses around downtown, back in the alleys. These are the similar size cans that we have. What we're proposing is essentially setting up every single residence or any individual metered home that's considered a residential unit within the city of Morgantown, a 96-gallon cart that will be managed, delivered, and maintained by Republic Services itself. The carts are made of HDPE plastic, so they last generally for years and years, but we will have replacement schedules built into there, as well as repair routines and communications. The idea behind the introduction of carts comes from a lot of different perspectives. First and foremost, it kind of cleans the streets up. And this is something that has changed a lot since the pandemic of, the piles of trash outside of certain places. In the past, because people would be leaving their homes, normal trash cans would be 2 or 3 bags, and now we have certain routes where they roll up to a stop and there's 35 bags, a couch, a TV, and they'll spend 25 minutes doing a single place. And by the time we get there, which might not be until different times in the day, wind has blown, litter has scattered, and our drivers, are now outfitted with brooms and shovels and more than they ever have before. But the amount of litter that is spreading off does become an issue. So the carts obviously is containing that, making it a lot more cleaner look. And from the operational perspective, it obviously improves a lot of issues there where we're not battling enormous piles on a regular basis, and keeping everything a little bit more cleaner and a little bit more streamlined. So realizing that these are 3 larger changes that we've had. We've been servicing, Republic Services has been servicing the city for over 20 years, and we've never done anything this dramatic of a change, especially 3 large dramatic changes, on top of all the constant improvements we're trying to do on a regular basis. But everything here should align to address a lot of the different issues that we continue to kind of work on. So with that said, is there any questions on the specific changes?
And you may have spoken on it. So the website, right now you don't have any service alerts or anything like that?
No, not formally. Some of our commercial customers can sign up for service alerts. So one thing that we've also done in the past 2 years is we introduced essentially tablets into all of our trucks. The residential line just receives tablets as well. This gives a lot of live time communication to the point that some commercial residents can actually opt in to see when their truck is on their way, what time it's going to be there. If there was a block, it'll automatically be texted a picture of a vehicle blocking it, extra yardage, things like that. So that is also being rolled out to the residential line, which will in turn eventually is something that we can adapt into that website. But no, there's no automated alerts. What we also have introduced, I think about 18 months ago, is text-em-all alerts is what we call them. So we used to do what we do call blast, of essentially blasting out phone calls, depending on route, up to 13,000 phone numbers in this area here. And then we realized the retention is not great on that, so we shifted into doing text blasts, and that's improved a lot. We've heard a lot of positive feedback on that, so we're kind of going to find a way to mirror the website along with the text-to-balls to kind of hit the communication from a couple different spaces.
So can residents sign up for the text alerts now if like if the trash isn't getting picked up that day for some reason?
Yes, and that's again another thing that we are working around is the text-em-all alerts that we have is based on the phone number list that's provided from us, which is obviously ever-changing. So oftentimes we'll get text back saying, stop texting, I live in Maryland. So shifting around that, getting a better cadence to updating those records so we can be more accurate with that is something that we'll probably introduce into the website of, click here to update your phone number to receive service alerts. Mm-hmm. And again, it depends on kind of what people would want. But being a website, we can adapt it and change it. And some things don't work, we can pull them down and we can test out different things.
And I'm sorry if you already said it. When did you plan for this website to be able to go live?
So we're still working on the finalization of the contract draft. We hope to have it early November. And for this current addendum to go into effect, I believe it will be February 1st. So we would have our website pretty much ready to launch sometime in February.
Thank you.
Other questions?
Yes, I have one, just a really quick one. My parents also have Republic in the township that they live in Illinois, and they were given 2 bins, they look exactly like the blue one, but one for recycling and one for garbage. Is this one are we just getting the one that's garbage, and is there plans to get recycling ones later on in the future, or are we just looking at one garbage bin right now?
We currently provide recycling cans, the 65-gallon green carts, so this is an addition to that. So every resident, every home will be set up with a 65-gallon, which is whatever we call it, lighter green recycling cart, and a 95-gallon blue trash or MSW cart.
Cool. I live in an apartment, so I have the big bin, so I wasn't sure. Thank you.
And to feed into that, we have had numerous people who didn't receive residential recycling because they didn't qualify because they're a business or they're in some sort of a housing accommodation that doesn't receive a bin. At one point, even bins were distributed, then they were kind of used improperly, and then they were all collected again.
Yeah.
And people were sad who knew what they were for and were using them correctly, were sad that other people just used them for trash because they really didn't know what they were for. But at some point, it would be nice to have all different customers, like you said, with education, be able to have the recycling. And, if they've come here from another place, they'll say, well, I always had that in my apartment building somewhere else, or I always had that behind my business.
Right.
So,
yeah, and one way that's all around education and communication when it comes to that. And that's when I was saying that everything kind of circles back with one another. But to the website, it can be easily accessed through a QR code. So we're actually looking at options of essentially printing little stickers that we can actually stick on the cans themselves. So people can scan it and see what can I throw in this can, and giving them options on things like that.
we've asked for that before.
Yeah, we're slowly getting onto it. But yeah, we've had several attempts of rolling single stream recycling out to multi-unit complexes, and almost every time it fails. And unfortunately, people dump paint in the can, or the most anything you can imagine ends up in these recycling cans. So for the integrity of the whole of the recycling stream, we end up having to pull that stuff back in, because if we drop below a certain contamination rate,
Yeah,
we'll lose our
imagine.
ability to do the program altogether. So we are a bit hawkish about it sometimes, but the idea is to kind of keep that quality moving forward. And we've done an amazing job, I can say, just in my 3 years as being a general manager overseeing this site, we've probably improved our contamination tenfold. So it's getting there, and I think we can get to that point again, and I think we can with a couple of these steps.
So the green cans for recycling come in a larger size and a smaller size that's helpful for people who are, say, retirees or don't generate much trash and just have trouble with that size and having a place for it and maneuvering it. Is there a possibility that someone who requests a smaller receptacle could have that? Is that, or do you tend to just have your one toter and that's?
We tend to have the one size toter because it simplifies things. I guess the best way to say that is we do have a lot of accommodations for a number of residents throughout the city that's not usually publicly disclosed. But if most people call us, and for instance, somebody that can't manage their cart to the curb, we have what we call backdoor service. Where essentially there is a qualification for it, so not everybody can get it. But we just need to know where the identification of the stop is. A supervisor will come out and confirm that it's safe. There's no, animals or hazards getting to it, and then they'll actually walk to where the can is, bring it out to the truck, and then bring it back to where it was. So there is a process in place, and that can also be outlined better going forward.
And then we had asked if you had a color sample for your other colors. Do you have one?
I do have this. I can kind of leave and pass around. It's not the most eclectic amount of colors.
It's okay.
The one thing I can say when it comes to the color of the carts, the blue containers, which is I think the second one in here with the black lids, is essentially what we're proposing right now. Anything more than that's technically a specialty item, so it does get more expensive. And the way that things kind of work with production nowadays, it could be harder to get. So for a color to be available, let's say the unique yellow one, the price and availability is one way now. 12 months from now, production cycles change, plastic commodities markets change dramatically, and we have a lockdown on availability and pricing for blue. But for other colors, we might not be able to maintain that color over long periods of time and at the same price.
So I have a color that's currently one of your cans.
Mm-hmm.
That's like sort of a dark gray.
Yeah, it looks
color.
like an Allied Waste can. Yeah.
Pretty. Yeah. Sorry.
Mm-hmm.
There it is. What I'm wondering is, I have seen you all have that color before in Sunnyside.
Yes.
What I'm wondering is that one of your colors, and is that a more? It's like a dark gray, not black. But
No, I think it would be this one. So that cart that you showed me in the picture, I'm really testing my vision on that, but I think it was an Allied Waste cart, which fell out of production probably around 2009.
Yeah.
So while the same manufacturers are still in place, which is primarily Schaefer, which makes most of these carts nationwide, the color, and I can leave this with you all, and I can pick it up. I think it would probably match closer to this, which means it is available to make into production. They have the dyes and the production for it. And again, the gray is not super abnormal. It's not like a yellow or in some places you'll see pink or purple.
No.
But it does become more challenging at certain times.
Yeah.
So depending on the color, we can kind of research the availability, the changes in pricing, market conditions, and talk to the manufacturer and talk about, is this a realistic long-term option or not?
So the reason why we went with that kind of grass green color for recycling and then this type of a color, and people have heard me say this before, so they're probably going to be like wondering why I'm saying it again, but grass green kind of blends in with grass, and dark gray color or some similar color kind of blends in with asphalt, tree trunks and stuff like that. And a lot, because of our topography in certain areas, like down Willie Street, for instance, or in the downtown, people don't have places to put their cart in between pickups. And so if we didn't have topography and kind of tight roads, we might not be necessary because people could just bring their cart in and you wouldn't have to look at it for the entire week. But we noticed that the blue or yellow or pink would just be kind of, we're just trying to have that clean look that you were talking about by having this type of container. Is not augmented in our setting by any kind of bright color. So it would be helpful to have a color like that.
Yeah, and I can leave these samples just to make sure if it's the right one, but I'm pretty sure that's the same.
Please leave
gray.
those samples.
Okay.
Great. Other questions?
I was asked by one of our neighborhood associations if there's like an outreach point of contact if we're doing a cleanup in a neighborhood, and you may know this, that you could provide some services to help a neighborhood that wants to do a trash pickup.
Public Works. That's Damien back there.
Well, in the way of, I don't know, do you do that with any other communities?
In the instance of like providing roll-off dumpsters similar to how we do with the student move-out, or?
Yeah, maybe a small dumpster or equipment to help be safe, people be safe with picking things up.
Depending on what it is, I mean, we're pretty much open to try anything out when it comes down to it. I guess if it's kind of a unique thing going through Carol's, usually everyone says that, and unfortunately she probably hates me for that, but most of the stuff is the best way. Then she'll just contact me directly, and then we can work out specific. I mean, if it's just kind of organizing what the public cleanup is, the best ways to do it, providing equipment or things like that is always something we can kind of look into.
Okay, thank you. I was just curious if you had a program or if it was just sort of a one-off.
It's a one-off, but we build programs constantly, so it's...
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Can we talk about Fridays?
Yeah.
So sometimes what happens on Fridays, and this would have to do with 4th Ward, 7th Ward, I don't know who else has Friday pickups. But sometimes throughout the week, there's been a truck down or not enough people or whatever to pick up. And then you get to Friday, and if for some reason Friday's residents' trash doesn't get picked up, then it just sort of sits over the weekend. And then we were super glad recently, it was like Columbus Day, and your services came on a Monday when I thought maybe they wouldn't until Tuesday, so people were really excited. But I didn't know if there was something that could be done, like service is better than it used to be, but not quite there. So how do we work with Fridays if you can get us an extra truck or what can we do?
I remember this conversation from 2 years ago too, and it's burned in the back of my mind. And no, it's fine. It's kind of been our goal at the end of this, which is why we've been kind of working towards that. A lot of it comes down to the amount of drivers that we have on the road, maintaining those routes from that Monday through Thursday, making sure everything is running on schedule. And then if issues do come up, a truck breaks down, somebody calls off on a Friday, our goal right now is if we have any amount of DOT hours left in our day, including with supervisors, which has been the recent case, we put them in trucks, pickup trucks if it comes down to it, and run them on Saturdays. Worst case scenario, we kind of implemented about 2 years ago. We're no longer saying we're not coming back. We're either coming on that Saturday or we're coming back on that Monday. So that's been kind of step one with dealing with those Friday customers, specifically like that Sunnyside area used to be the difficult one. But when the next piece of it is what we're working on right now, which will go live probably around January, and it's not something that most people will notice. But I mentioned it back 2 years ago too. We're slowly working on rerouting and rebalancing the entire county. So we service about 13,000 residents, and everybody has a very specific time they want us to be there. So kind of taking all that information in and then balancing out so we don't run into those issues on Fridays anymore, and tapering our routes in a way that our, the majority of our weight typically falls on our Monday to Wednesdays, which means that we continue to have to chase our tails back from Monday to Wednesday. We've been slowly cutting those times down and moving those backwards to avoid those Friday issues. And they have gotten better. They're not where they need to be yet. I would say, over the next few months, I don't think we'll have issues with Fridays anymore. And it's not going to be anything you're going to see specifically in the city. It's things that we're shifting in the county, specifically around communities that have just exploded in population in the past 5-10 years, and we've never kind of rebalanced how we handle those Fridays. So that's, step one was we need to change our recovery plans from, hey, we didn't get you, we'll see you next week. We stopped that. We're either going to get you on Saturday or we're going to get you on Monday. And then part two of it is rebalancing the entirety of our routing to no longer set us up to the point that Fridays should be no different than Wednesdays, no different than Mondays. And we're almost there with that.
Yeah, to piggyback on what Jenny's saying, there's a section of my street that gets missed probably once every 2 weeks or something like that. It's a small section of Eastern Avenue, and those neighbors, I live down the street from them, I live on the same street. I always get picked up, but they get missed very frequently, and I get those calls every time. Now, the last time that they got missed, I will say that you guys came back out an hour later and picked them up. But the frustration that they've always given me is that they feel like, because, every time that they've been missed except for that time, at least in their experience and how they experience it, right, is that they don't get their trash picked up until the next trash pickup. Right. And they're a Friday morning. Their frustration is more that, like, they feel like they're not being listened to, especially because it's that one section. And it's not necessarily the same houses every time, although some of them feel like it is the same houses. But I drive that way to work every morning. It's the road I go up to. It's my road. It's kind of like, and I will see it in the mornings that, like, yeah, this one's missed, this one's missed, this one's missed. So I guess the broader question I have is, like, is there a way that you're identifying and maybe collecting data about places that might be problem areas for you, that you have trouble with collection, or, I don't know, what the logistics are for that. And then I understand that you have this part of the website coming out, but what they've really asked me is, like, that they feel like they're not being heard, you know what I mean? And, like, how do they have better communication with Republic? Who can I talk? They feel like when they talk to, when they just call the number, that they, when you guys don't come and pick up the trash, of course they feel like they're not being heard,
Right.
So.
No, I do understand what you're saying. So most missed pickups are happenstance. Maybe they're just random. People put their carts out at a different time. The truck comes at a different time. Identifying kind of the more common areas typically comes through a Carol, where if a specific street or in a specific address pops up either through our call centers, which if they're calling to the call center, it goes through essentially the computer system that marks up that address. The routing supervisors locally based here do keep track to a certain level if they see repeating addresses on a regular basis, and then do an audit on the driver or pull up GPS or see if times shift. But obviously, if it's, and I'm not familiar with Eastern Avenue specifically, but if it's a smaller number of units, it's not abnormal for sometimes that to slip under the cracks. So in the long term, yes, the website will have a place of, are you having chronic issues? This is a way to kind of get through our local office. So one of those routing supervisors will see it and say, we need to do an audit on this area. Right now, our path is, unfortunately, the best way to get our attention on those more chronic issues is to route it through the city's office. and Carol reaches out directly to myself or the operations manager, and then we open up a case and we investigate it, and typically we even follow back up with Carol with specifics of this is what was happening, this is what we did, this is what we want you to do if you ever see anything again. That's just how we've been dealing with our service issues predominantly for the past 2 years, is just opening up case files, doing investigations, doing corrections, and then closing them. We've done hundreds of them in the past several years. Obviously working our way through that as drivers are changing and different things do erupt, but right now going through the city's office is the best way to kind of get our attention to specific issues, and then if there's an issue specifically maybe with residents on Eastern, we can send out specific communications just to them saying your site's going to be under special review for the next 30 days, which means you're going to see more supervisor trucks maybe rolling through your area prior to the pickup. After the pickup, you might see drivers taking pictures. They have to prove that they're coming, they prove that they're leaving at what times. It seems a little crazy, but it works in time, and that's the best way to kind of solve it.
Okay, I appreciate it. Thank you.
No other questions?
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Our fourth presentation of the evening is Milan Pushkar Health Right Harm Reduction Program with Executive Director Laura Jones.
Good evening. Thank you very much for having us here this evening. I'm Laura Jones. I'm the Executive Director at Health Right, and I'm here to talk about the LIGHT project, which is our harm reduction syringe access program. And you may remember from last year that the state implemented a new licensure law. And as a part of that licensure law, we are required to request the city's approval as well as the county's approval in order to continue our program. And this is renewable on a yearly basis, and we will need to renew by the middle of December. So we're here today to give you a little update on where we are and just remind you of the importance of this public health intervention that helps decrease HIV and Hep C, as well as support people who are using drugs, obviously until they're ready for recovery. We have seen some changes within our program. Many of you may remember Emily Baldwin, who was our director of harm reduction. She left us to move to Pittsburgh and provide harm reduction education to an entire health system. And she's doing quite well, and we're really proud of her and her hate that she left Morgantown, but she always wanted to live in a big city, so she's doing that. And then Caitlin had taken over as director, and she has decided to take a break and then move on to new adventures. So we were extremely lucky that Cassidy Thompson, who will be speaking to you here in a minute, was willing to accept the position at Health Right as the harm reduction director. She will, unlike Emily, who had multiple jobs at Health Right, she will specifically focus completely on the harm reduction program. And already, since she started, a month and a half ago, she has shown us that she's got lots of creativity and ideas. And when you talk to her, you will realize the passion that she brings to the position. So we're really excited to have Cassidy on board. And she will tell you a little bit about the outcomes that we've looked at this year. We've had some changes in how we collect data, so our data is not as tight as we would like it to be. But I can say that there has been a change in, I think, the overall number of people that we've been able to provide syringes to because of the licensure law. And I think that we probably have not to date this year, we will not reach the number of syringes that we gave out in the past, because we're now moving to a one-to-one exchange. So the concern that we will have an HIV outbreak here is very real. And the state numbers continue to go up. We have received feedback from the HIV clinic at WVU, and they strongly believe that the LIGHT project and the harm reduction program we have here is the only reason that we have not seen a huge increase in HIV in our community. So obviously, we believe that it's a vital thing for us to continue. And we also have 2 sharps containers that are now placed in 2 different areas of the community, and we are checking those, and they are being used. So that's good news. Let me turn you over to Cassidy, and then if you have questions at the end for me.
Yes, I did bring some handouts, but my printer was not agreeable, so some of you might have to share. I'm Cassidy Thompson. Like Laura said, I'm really excited to be here. I'm really excited to be a part of HealthRight and the LIGHT project. Harm reduction is my passion. I have lived experience with substance use, been in long-term recovery for over 7 years, and I've worked in other fields that touch this population, but now to like be here and actually be able to do it is really something that I'm passionate about. The LIGHT project just celebrated its 7th birthday this past summer. And while it is a syringe service program, we offer a lot of other services. And some of the numbers that I'm going to talk about here, I'm just going to jump right to the numbers because I know that's what people want to hear. The data that we looked at is going to range from June of this year until September, the end of September. In that time, we distributed 999 naloxone kits, and we had 160 overdoses that were reversed and reported to us. And 100% of those overdoses resulted in the recipient being alive. So that's a really big deal. That's 160 lives. We provided 197 educational sessions and 90 naloxone trainings during that time. And we saw 100,026,248 syringes returned, which is a really big deal. That's a lot of syringes being disposed of properly. We gave out 1,085 sharps containers, and when we give out sharps containers, we provide education on proper sharps disposal. We also saw 1,049 safer use methods being dispensed between June and September, and that means supplies geared towards other methods of consumption other than injection, which is excellent when we're talking about preventing the risk of HIV and Hep C. We dispensed 2,300 fentanyl test strips. We also have partnered with people that attend WVU or have graduated from WVU, and we've been reaching out to the Greek Life Fair and other various places on campus to give fentanyl test strips to students. Fentanyl test strips are going out to bars, Narcan kits. Fentanyl's in everything, and a lot of times people are using recreational substances. Unbeknownst to them, they're overdosing on fentanyl that they did not really consent to taking. So getting those things out is really important to us. Like Laura said, I do have a lot of ideas. It's like kind of my thing. And so there are some new initiatives that we want to implement in the coming year. We want to implement widening the variety of sexual harm reduction supplies offered at our harm reduction clinics, especially like we said HIV is in our back door. There's an outbreak in Clarksburg, and I don't think it's gonna stop there. We also want to incentivize regular HIV and hepatitis C testing, and we are currently working on a gift card donation raffle to enter anyone who gets tested and wants to be entered into a monthly raffle, and then they can win some gift cards just for being tested. And we are also going to have access to an experienced nurse practitioner during our Wednesday evening clinic hours who will be able to prescribe PrEP as well as other HIV treatments, which is really cool. And on Fridays, we have a provider who does hepatitis C treatments. So we're not just testing people. We are saying, hey, please get this treatment. We really want to offer treatment. And the other initiative is cleanup, and not just syringe litter, but just litter in general. That I believe, and Laura and everyone that's involved with the Light Project believes, that harm reduction is not just for the participants, it's for the community as well, and this is a great way to show that. We are also implementing support by way of an overdose survivor support group, and this is offered to everyone that is impacted by overdose. We'll be offering this group bi-weekly starting the second week in November on Thursdays at 1 p.m. at Friendship House in Morgantown, and that will continue when they move locations as well. And that just offers support to people that have been impacted by overdose, whether it's people who use drugs, moms that lost their kids, or friends that lost their friend. I already talked about our testing raffle, and we are implementing a participant advisory board. Advisory boards are common in most places that provide services, and this will give the participants of our program a chance to tell us what we're doing that's working for them, what they'd like to see change, or voice any concerns that they might be having. So, yeah, that is all that I have. I just want to reiterate that 160 overdoses were reversed and reported using naloxone kits distributed by our program, and that's a really big deal. That is 160 chances that those people might not have had to find recovery eventually. So I think that the Light Project is doing really great work.
Thank you. Does anyone have any questions for Laura or Cassidy?
Really quick, sorry, you're fine. I remember that we had one of the Sharps containers in a location and then it ended up moving. Can you just remind me where the two Sharps container locations are?
One is at the entrance of Whitmore Park, and the other one is now located
On the back of the city building.
Behind the city building.
behind the city building. Yeah,
I thought that
it was
was the
moved
one.
from its original spot.
It's not at the farmer's market anymore, it's now in the back of the building.
Near the pavilion,
Okay,
but not.
thank you. Other questions?
Nobody else does. Cassie, it's really great to see you here in this position. I had recently learned about, and you probably already know about this, but the One Box Initiative from the West Virginia Drug Intervention Institute. Are you aware of that? So it's, I didn't know if this would be like helpful for you guys, if it's something that you thought you could implement, but they are these boxes that could be like installed on a wall, and they open up and they'll play a video that shows you how to administer Naxalone. And it has like a CPR kit in it. It, like I said, plays the video, and then it has the Naloxone in it. And I just thought that was really cool. It was developed in West Virginia. I think they're like $200 a pop or something like that. I didn't know if that was something you guys had looked into or thought of, but like it'd just be neat to have those in places like what you're thinking of, like, so that it's not necessarily that somebody has to keep it on them at all times. It's actually in that physical space. They have like a little tab on them so that you can tell if they've been broken and stuff like that. So.
Like a fire extinguisher.
Yeah, but
that's awesome.
Yeah, for drug overdose, and I don't know, if they work with organizations. I would imagine so, but That was just something, I think I heard like a story on NPR or something like that.
I did too. Yeah,
Okay.
just the other day.
Yeah. So, yeah.
I would definitely love to look into that and maybe collaborate with the city on putting it somewhere like near the Sharps containers.
Mhm.
That would be a really good idea, I think.
I have been working with,
You probably want to.
If you went to the microphone, then people
Yeah,
can
because they
hear
can't
you.
hear you at home.
I was talking with the Office of Drug Control Policy about it's similar to that. It has a drop down and there's a computer in it, but it's like a machine that dispenses candy bars. Only the compartments have they can have all kinds of things in them. They could have fentanyl test strips in them or naloxone, and all you have to do is very quickly type in really quickly a few things, and then the box opens and you get whatever it is that you need immediately. And I think that would be a great idea for downtown during the bar scene, but I haven't heard anything from them, and it is a lot more costly than $200, so
Yeah.
maybe we should try that first. But yes, I think we would very much support something like that.
Mayor, you had a question?
I just appreciate the enthusiasm and innovation that you have, and we're looking at your last sheet there with your ideas, and I just think it's great and appreciated because we'd like to prevent people being harmed. It's hard enough having problems with addiction without having HIV and Hep C and so on. So anyway,
Thank you so much.
thank you.
And I appreciate the cleanup initiative.
Yes.
Please call me. Unfortunately, litter in general is terrible everywhere, and syringe litter continues to be a huge problem here. I notice a lot when I'm out cleaning up, so I'm always happy to help. I've been trying to provide Sharps disposal training to as many people around town that participate in my cleanups as I can, so always happy to help. Call me.
Great.
Thank you, guys.
Our final presentation of the evening, the city's infrastructure on paving and sidewalks with the Director of Public Works, Damian Davis, and Staff Engineer, Drew Gatlin. He's here.
Yeah, I was trying to think of how I was going to stall for until we got here.
Don't worry,
he made
we're plenty
good
good
timing
at
entrance.
taking our time.
Yeah. So Drew's going to present tonight on a request in our plan to try to, over the next few years, to start addressing sidewalks in the city. One of the things we're going to be looking at is how to fund that, and our request to look at funding through the ARPA money and also through the MSS funds to help fund sidewalk maintenance, construction, and then looking at the routes that we're going to prioritize using both the MPO's plan and our knowledge of the city to put that plan together. And so as soon as he gets set up, I'll let him take over since he's done the vast majority of the work on this project.
Got some reverb in here, huh?
These mics are hot tonight.
Hot mics. All right. Let's see here. Perfect. All right. Well, I have quite a few slides for you all, but not too many. I really appreciate you having me tonight, and I'm so excited to be presenting this plan to you all. I know that this is really decades in the making. At this point, many decades before the actual formal pedestrian safety plan was published in 2010, people have been vying for more sidewalks in Morgantown, right? We have an extremely healthy pedestrian population here. The 2012 census showed that about 17% of all trips are taken on foot in Morgantown, which is one of the highest percentages in the entire country, not just for like a city our size. In general, building more of the motivation for those of you that are not yet convinced that we need more funding for sidewalk, right? Pedestrians certainly face hazards where sidewalks exist, right? Some of these I'm calling ephemeral hazards. Over here you can't quite see it too well, but there's a lady on Spruce Street being forced to walk around in the actual street. A lot of people parking on sidewalks, although after I started paying attention to that problem and then visited Pittsburgh, I realized that we're actually in a significantly better place than many places for parking on the sidewalk. So, some of these problems that pedestrians face and these hazards are significantly longer lasting, right? The condition of the actual sidewalk itself, disconnected infrastructure, right? So on Pattison Drive over here on the picture on the right, we have certainly formal pedestrian facilities. There are crossings at signalized intersections. There's sidewalks everywhere, but still people just kind of in the middle of the road, right? Very dangerous, hazardous areas.
I appreciate the picture with my campaign sign.
Ah, yes. Look at that. Yeah, right. And then, of course, right, pedestrians walking without formal facilities, right? This is just one of many state-owned roads in the city of Morgantown that lacks completely any type of formal facility except for, motor vehicles. So that's typically what we focus on when we talk about our infrastructure. Where do we have all the gaps? Where do we need new sidewalks, right? We certainly do need investments in our existing sidewalk network, which is depicted here. I would describe this picture as scattered, right? And kind of inconsistent in terms of its density and its ability to connect people in a sort of a low stress way to the places that they want to go. So in yellow, on this background map of Morgantown, you'll have our existing sidewalks depicted. We've got about 75 miles that are known and tracked and mapped as part of this database. I'm mentioning these specifics here, right? So that 75 miles includes sidewalks on both sides of the road, right? So for 1 mile of roadway, if there are sidewalks on both sides, I'll count that as 2 miles. It includes, in that 75 miles, public, private, state road, state-owned, quote-unquote, and maintained sidewalks, locally owned and maintained sidewalks. It does not include our rail trail network, which many people think of as, and rightfully so, a formal pedestrian facility. So the city of Morgantown, right, we maintain about 110 miles of roadway. And so if you extrapolate that out, right, 220 miles of potential sidewalk, we've only got about 34% of our entire potential network, right, built out. And yet we are still supporting a massive number of pedestrian trips in the city. Damien mentioned the MPO bike ped plan. It was published in very early 2020, right before we knew really the pandemic was a thing. And that will come up later. So in that plan that many of you all participated in, and hopefully you all are familiar with, we were given, we collectively, the region, the MPO, and the various municipalities and agencies that participated in it, more than 750 projects that they recommended that we do. It was costed, it was phased. Some of them were even kind of 20% design. Most of those were on state routes. And that totaled up to about $100 million. So yeah, those are also 2019 estimated $100 million, right? I know that you all don't want to necessarily spend city money in Westover, right? As much as we love our neighbors. So maybe we can try to chip away that $100 million to get to something that's a little bit more doable for the city, right? So you will see this big blue polygon here, which is our lovely, very logical city limits with no holes anywhere. So yeah, about $50 million of those projects, about half of them are outside of the city limits. Okay, so that's great. We've cut it in half. We don't care about the bicyclists, so let's get away anything that is just benefiting bicyclists. It's about $7 million, so we're down to $43 million. And also, we've done a lot of projects recently, right? Some of which are very popular, right? Those new upgrades on 8th Street, everybody loves them. We certainly did build the 8th Street sidewalk. We've done several. So we're chipping down. I have a grand total shown here of about $43 million. We're closer to about 40. Again, of these 750 plus original projects in the ALTA plan, the MMPO plan. We already do curb ramps as part of our paving project. We are legally required to upgrade most of those, so I took those out of this consideration as well. And we are left with a variety of other recommendations. So you all told me, and you told the administration, right, to come up with a proposal. I was told generally maybe $1 million per year to think about, and then let's plan out the next 10 years. Let's start with this plan and sift it and look at the priorities that they developed, and then let's just take the top million, the top projects and until it adds up to $1 million, and then let's just hop, jump, and skip away. I'm here to tell you that I don't think that's a great way to proceed. I mentioned that plan was, it was prioritized, right? These criteria here, you can't read them, so I'll describe them a little bit. It was prioritized based on 5 criteria defined and built by a steering committee. Those criteria included a safety measure, which was a pretty primitive safety measure, but more or less what we do, which is the number of reported crashes within 1,000 feet of a particular project, right? A recommendation. Does this project connect people to some existing infrastructure, or is it close to infrastructure like schools, university campuses and such that we know people really need to walk around, right? The design, right? This is a very interesting criteria that was very subjective, 1 out of 5. Does this project, just by its design and by, say, maybe its exclusiveness, right? Its separation from mixed traffic, right? Does it reduce somebody's level of traffic stress? Equity measures were included, so this is mostly socioeconomic data about neighborhood characteristics and the people that live in them. And then economy, right? So this is a little bit overlapping with equity, but a weighted average of employment and population densities, right? So every project was ranked along these criteria. But I will say, right, these were done in 2019. The plan was published in 2020, but all of the analysis was done in 2019. It was published before COVID. We know a lot of things have changed since COVID. Also, the plan was regional in nature, right? We certainly had about half of the recommended projects within the city of Morgantown, but the ultimate prioritization was done by the policy board of the MPO, right? And that is not focused on just the city. I think another important thing to think about is that none of these prioritizations and these projects were directly vetted by any neighborhood in which they were going into. Neighborhoods and people in the city of Morgantown certainly had a chance to participate in this planning process, but we're going on 4 years old at this point, And I do think that to just skim from the top and use this to plan the next 10 years of pedestrian investments is not my recommendation. My recommendation is to treat the first year as a jump start, right? So 4 major activities with what I think you all should do in 2023. Build, plan, design, and then evaluate, right? So you all might be interested in hearing mostly about the build portion of it. We are proposing 4 new sidewalks, right? So not replacing existing sidewalks, although we know that there's a lot of work that needs to be done there, right? We know that we have a lot of gaps. We know that we have a lot of pedestrians. We know that we have things that are planned and that we've also just recently built that we would like to sort of ensure that we get all of our bang for our buck, right? We want these to connect to existing low-stress networks. We want to connect to schools, to parks, places that people want to go. Leveraging these recent and imminent investments, right? So here, you're not going to be able to see it too well from that far away, but in pink, you will see the imminent investments that I'm talking about, right? And in red, which you really can't distinguish from the pink, I'm sure, is existing investments that we have made sometime over the past 20 years that the city has built, either directly itself or has contracted in terms of sidewalks and pedestrian improvements, right? So that one all along the bottom here, we have right, the Greenbag Road shared use path that has been formally sort of put up for a feasibility analysis at the very least with the RAISE grant that was announced by the MPO. Of course, the Greenbag Road widening. We want to make sure that people can get to that path from not just the very ends of it, right? We have things like the 8th Street sidewalk that we just built, the 8th Street and University intersection that we just reconfigured, right? We have the Baldwin sidewalk that we built. We have the Krebs sidewalk that we built. We have the Deckers Creek Boulevard sidewalk that we built, right? We have certainly the Kearns Crossing, or I forget what it's called. Yeah, anyway, the bridge, the Greenmont pedestrian bridge, right? We have the streetscape projects, right, that we did 10 years ago on High Street. We have the streetscape projects that we did last year and the years before, right, on Beverly and 3rd Street, right? It's not like we haven't been investing in pedestrians, right, I guess is what I'm saying here. But we want to make sure that we're not just dancing around TIF districts and making sure that we are, in our existing network here, looking at where are some neighborhoods that are underserved, right, that could, with a single sort of connector, really transform, right, their experiences as pedestrians, right? And so you may notice, oh yes, of course, the laser disappears. Well, we'll just go to it, right? So in blue are the 4 projects that I'm recommending. 2 of them are going to be relatively close to each other, and they are both in Jerome Park and Woodburn, right? So the first one, well, starting from the left here, would be connecting the fragments of sidewalks on Monongalia Avenue. In the bottom, in red, we have the existing sidewalks that we have built on Richwood some decades ago. And those certainly connect sort of people that are already down the hill, right, on Woodburn to downtown, and then they kind of dead end them near the community center that we so love and host so many community programs. But the people from Jerome Park, right, can't get quite over there, and then the people in Woodburn can't get to Mountaineer Middle, right, up there on Willie Street. We see dashed lines that are a little bit difficult to see here. paralleling the entirety of Willie Street. So those are our recommendations by the plan. Nothing that we, not our plan, but the Alta plan, pardon me. And we know that the MPO has submitted a $20 million, along with the city, proposal to relocate Willie Street. And so I'm saying that is a potential imminent investment, right? We know that there's things we want to do there. So I think Monongalia Avenue is a good first year project. The second one, also on the screen, Richwood Avenue, and connecting essentially from Jerome Park into Woodburn and therefore into the rest of the formal pedestrian network. Again, Jerome Park, depending on where you're at, has some good connectivity to existing infrastructure, but it's the other direction, right, towards Saberton. And then you're, of course, blocked by some state routes that are difficult to get across. We do have some dotted lines down at the bottom of Mineral there. We are working with the state Division of Safety, I guess, right? Traffic safety and whatnot, the planning office, to plan some improvements there to cross Powell Avenue. So again, I think both of these are building on the existing network, things that we've already invested in recently, and then things that we're about to invest in. The other major project that we are recommending for this first year would be connecting the sidewalk that ends not quite at the top of Grand Street, all the way down to Dorsey via Ross. So this one connects First Ward and Second Ward. They're already connected in some ways, but certainly, both of these slides, right, from here and over here, we have areas of Morgantown that you can see the density of sidewalks drops off, right? The further that we, get away from the city center. And so we're trying to fan out that network. Here, it's building on an extremely exciting potential investment that we have, the Dorsey Avenue sidewalk, right? I think this is an incredibly high priority. It is mostly on a state route, and it's certainly at least half on a state route. We have submitted a $4.5 million proposal with the Safe Streets for All grant and the MPO to build this sidewalk as well as a streetscape on South High Street. Separate from the funding that I'm asking you all to kind of consider and these projects I'm considering today, but building on those exciting investments, that sidewalk down Grand to Grandview and then down all the way Ross to the Circle K would fit in quite nicely and is sorely needed. It would also allow us to do some integrated traffic calming into the construction process on that corridor. The fourth project is very small, but was the highest ranked gap in the entire MPO plan, I believe, and that is a sidewalk on Oakland, just a single half block between McDonald's and West Everly Street. And if you've ever been over there, there are massive goat paths, desire paths that you will see people walking from all over the place, right? From the hospital to the Coliseum, from certainly the student housing that's over there to the Evansdale campus. And that is just an incredibly needed, probably, hopefully, very cheap, less than $50,000 sidewalk. These others, so these two and this one, along with that Oakland, we're looking at in what we paid for in this year's paving project, about $1.5 million just in the build. So pretty significant. You will see that there is a pink line at the very bottom of this. I want to talk about some of the investments that our partners are making. So the WVU, right, has taken up the torch of the campus connector. Praise be. And it is excellent to see them taking the lead on that. We've certainly attempted to do such a thing for the past 20 years, and I'm glad that they've taken it. They got a TAP grant from the State Department of Highways to design the campus connector. If you're not familiar with this project, it connects the end of Grant Avenue up to the President's House, essentially, or potentially all the way over to the greenhouses. And so very transformative project, builds on the success recently of our investment in 8th Street. And so, yeah, we certainly have a lot of improvements. The Rapid Response Group is looking at reconfiguring, and so the Rapid Response Group, pardon me, if you're not familiar, is a county, WVU, city consortium of decision makers that has been responsible for planning and allocating the investments that resulted in the rectangular rapid flashing beacon crossings and various rapid response projects. This one's a little bit less rapid, so we'll see how that goes. But reconfiguring the Raleigh Lane corridor, so that's kind of right up in the top center left of this photo. And that is just a very stressful roadway to be walking on, and so congested with all types of traffic, but connecting towers to the Kroger, and then also serving as the main low-stress connector for any of the kids that live in the Evansdale neighborhood and go to the middle school or onto the elementary school, right? So again, nothing I'm considering asking you all to fund, right? We already have a group that's looking into that. But that Oakland sidewalk, right? All of these things fitting into other good plans. So that's the build. How about these other three things that I'm asking you to consider, right? So I do think that light building, right? So Emily helped to lead, Emily and Damien certainly, the grinding of tripping hazards on High Street, right? Maybe not the prettiest thing, but sure is effective and quick, right? And tripping and falling hazards are one of the most dangerous things for pedestrians, particularly during the winter time, right? So we've got a lot of that in the city. And I did just get a really back of the napkin quote today, not quote, estimation, to grind the entire 75 miles that we've got at the types of defects and the frequency of defects that we saw on High Street, right? That's about $750,000, right? About $1,000 a mile. Not bad, not bad. Probably not very accurate, right? But just really back of the napkin. Also, not necessarily appropriate everywhere, right? There's other types of rapid response things. Leading pedestrian intervals. If you don't know what this is, you have two types of crossings at signalized intersections, right, for pedestrians. One of them is called concurrent, and that means that you as a pedestrian and you as a motorist, right, you are moving in opposing directions potentially at the same exact time, right? Mostly the opposing is coming from turning movements. That is by far the most common type of crossing that we see around the state of West Virginia. You also have exclusive crossing patterns at signalized intersections for pedestrians, and that means that cars are theoretically all stopped except for the cars that are turning right on red, and you have an exclusive phase for the pedestrians. The leading pedestrian interval is a incredible, beautiful combination of these two that has been shown to reduce crashes up to 93% in certain instances. And so it essentially gives pedestrians a head start to establish themselves into the crosswalk. It's a very straightforward change to a intersection if you have the right things wired and installed, like an accessible pedestrian signal that won't catch somebody that is perhaps vision impaired, right? That will announce like you can walk now. yeah, if you have that installed, then you can basically just reprogram this, and it's free. I can do it in 10 minutes. But anyway, so doing some of these things, making sure that we can, at least for the 3 signals that we control here, do rapid response stuff like this. Second thing, right? So plan. I think that we really need to update this existing plan. We need to ensure that the existing conditions analysis of both the sidewalks, right? Which ones need replaced and which ones don't. And then the built environment. What has changed since 2019, right? That we need to have a reasonable investment into that. If we were to pay a firm to walk every single sidewalk and inventory every single one of our deficiencies, right? So tripping hazards as well as obstructions and sidewalks that don't meet the accessibility guidelines, et cetera, and maybe hopefully look at more gaps and such, then we would be looking at spending $100,000 to $250,000 just on that, but sorely needed, I think, in order to help truly plan the next 10 years of investments. And reevaluating these priorities, ensuring that those criteria are still valid, maybe weighting those criteria. The steering committee lost a little bit of steam towards the end of the planning process, and we ended up deciding to just weight all of those criteria equally, and that's generally not a great way to do it. And then setting aside a significant chunk of funding to design complicated future projects. So the 4 projects that we are presenting to you today, they're pretty straightforward. They don't need a massive amount of complicated design. And so that's also partially why we chose them and why we think that they're sound, good investments for this first year so that we can actually build these. Setting aside monies for design, and then, of course, evaluation. So with that Safe Streets for All grant that Bill Austin put together, he also included an educational $500,000 for essentially developing an education program for all types of transportation users and how we can all behave a little bit together. I think we also need to really consider understanding in a systematic way, are the investments that we're making good? Are they equitable? Are they achieving the goals that we want to achieve? These performance measures that you cannot read, they were established in that plan, right? And I am saying establish realistic performance measures, right? Some of these things are very difficult to measure. So I think that it is important for us to establish goals that we that both reflect our values, but also that we can measure. So that is it for my presentation. I am happy to take any questions. Thank you so much.
Who's got questions about the sidewalk plan?
Are we allowed to stand up and clap?
Oh, thank you.
It's only a couple of months past when the manager promised it, but it's a good plan, so not too bad, not too bad.
Good things take a little.
You don't.
Yeah, right.
Did you give any kind of consideration to funding?
So I have thought a lot about funding, but I was specifically told not to look at funding. I do have a basic recommendation. So to reiterate, I don't think that you all have the ability to, even at this point, figure out how we're going to fund 10 years of $1 million per year investment. And so I would recommend that you identify the most flexible funds that you have at your disposal right now, and as much of them as possible, right? $2.5 million would fund all of the description, everything that I have described here. And certainly have a I think that's a conservative evaluation. We could find that the expenses were less than that, but yeah, I think that would be an incredible jump start to the year. I believe you do have $2.5 million-ish that are not fully allocated of the ARPA funds. So that would be my recommendation. Very flexible dollars, one-time investment, and we spend that time figuring out, can Public Works effectively build crews to build sidewalks to help control our costs in the future? What would that type of investment look like? Can we pass a levy? Are levies still legal, right? Is the user fee still legal? Is sales tax still legal? All of that kind of thing, right? We're in a lot of uncertainty right now, and so identifying perpetual revenue streams to fund $1 million per year, I think is difficult. And so, if we use the flexibility of the ARPA funds, and again, as much as you're willing to give to this, I think every dollar would be spent and go a long way. A long way.
How close, excuse me, how close are we to realization on these projects? In other words, how much work needs to be done in order to put them into beginning?
Put them into beginning. So those 4 projects that I listed that were $1.5 million specific dollars are, again, chosen specifically to be buildable, specifically to be, good investments. I believe that they are more or less shovel ready. There's no designs that's sitting on the shelf, but we have built several things without formal design recently, and we've had good success with that. We are also about to engage on-call consultants for engineering and design, and so any hiccups that we had, we will have people ready to respond that have already been through the formal 5G process. The rest of it, the planning, et cetera, I have been working to identify different methods of doing these plans, finding different types of vendors rather than potentially faraway consultants, right, that are doing mostly sort of very high-level, regional, aerial-based planning, right, looking at engaging more local knowledge, right, doing more vetting with neighborhoods and all of that. And so I do believe that this is all ready to go, more or less.
We have right-of-way?
Yes, for all of these projects, we have right-of-way. Yep.
Appreciate the work. I have a couple specific questions, maybe one general question. How long does pedestrian infrastructure last? My understanding is that it lasts a lot longer than roadways, so when we invest monies here, we can expect it to last longer. Can you?
Right. Yeah. When you're in school, they tell you that asphalt roads last 20 years, and when you're here, they last 5. So when you're in school, they tell you that sidewalks last 100, and here I'd say that they last about 50, maybe 60, some of them 100 years. But it really depends on the quality of the construction and all of that. I mean, some of the sidewalks that were recently placed on Beechhurst, for example, are already kind of wearing in an awkward manner on the top, right? So it very much is based, but we're looking at between 4 to 5 to 10 times as long lasting in terms of roadways investments.
If we were to look at some point in the near future, some sort of, so say we used whatever ARPA funds we had available, and then we wanted to look for our next set. And we wanted to develop something that was appropriate for a grant, hopefully a grant that had a quicker turnaround than some. how would we best get prepared for that if we're putting in 25% or less every year into sort of planning for the next couple of years? If we wanted to make a package that was a couple $1 million, $2 to $3 million, something like that, how would we scale up to do that so it wasn't a waste of time if we didn't get the grant, because we would do them more slowly? How would we scale up?
Yeah, so one of the things I think we are fortunately one step ahead, right? Having on-call consultants, engineering and design, that are available to expand our capacities internally, to doing this type of planning and light design that would be prepping for bid package or grant packages, is key, right? And we are very close to having several firms on retainer, essentially. The second thing would be ensuring that we potentially include a criteria of, is this thing easy to build or is it not easy to build, right? And being able to really, in a moment, sort a table of projects based on feasibility, constructability, et cetera, right? And then thirdly would be engaging those on-call consultants and using that 25% to essentially not just design, right, the next year's projects, right, but get in a sort of a leapfrogging situation where you are doing 10%, designs or whatever you think is appropriate. We don't necessarily want to follow a traditional 10, 30, 60, 90, 100% design process, because that is expensive, right? But certainly finding that sweet spot to have plans on the shelf that would be ready for grant submission, I think is totally key. Yeah.
I'm trying to remember, out of the ARPA survey, I think this was one of the items that people requested, but that we hadn't yet addressed.
Okay.
So it seems very appropriate that y'all are here, and appreciate all your work.
Any other questions for Drew?
I just comment. Thank you very much for the presentation and the suggestions. And as we're looking at doing this, just kind of one comment would be, could we use this opportunity to look at what is on the books as an ordinance in terms of maintenance for sidewalks now, and revisit that and look at what makes sense and what's not enforced? How could we change it to better suit our needs as a community?
Absolutely. That is the elephant in the room, is that why would the city build any sidewalks that are not on its own parcels if we are not responsible for anything except for what's on our own parcels based on the code? I think, yes, certainly the ALTA plan, the MPO plan in 2020 talked a lot about that. We have made recent changes to inch towards a different paradigm. Ryan and I and several others, right, Damien and certainly the Traffic Commission, right, spent a long time talking about updating the sidewalk ordinance and developing placeholders for things like cost sharing programs, et cetera. I do think that it would be a reasonable trade-off with the citizens of Morgantown to propose a levy in exchange for taking on full responsibility of the sidewalks and just removing that. But, that's very complicated, as I'm sure you all are very well aware. And so, but yeah, right now we can say you've got to spend $10,000 right now, 30 days, and we don't. So, but it's the awkward thing. We certainly have built a lot of sidewalks. We've built them on state roads. We've built them on local roads. We've built them on, railroad rights of way, right? All these types of things, and we are clearly planning to build more, right? So, I think that is it's a very, very appropriate part of the planning and evaluation kind of recommendations that I have here.
Great, thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you, Drew. And thank you for coming to the Woodburn Association meeting last week. I think people in Fifth Ward are going to be very excited with the planned projects, but
Good.
could be biased.
Cool.
Thanks.
Thank you.
The White Avenue street sign is right back behind you all there.
I see that, yes. Thank you for.
It was vandalism. It looks like it was rusted old.
Yeah, it was just laying there, so I brought it home.
Poor thing.
Dave stole a street sign.
Put it in your living room. The college decor.
Yeah.
All right. That brings us to our public portion for this evening. This is the opportunity for any member of the public to address council about any item. Is there anyone wishing to address council this evening? Ms. Gourdet?
You'll have to excuse my appearance. I was out running errands and just thought I'd stop by to say hello. This will be short. I just have a few questions, and then I wanted to follow up with something that I brought up at city council meeting before. I recently attended the police pension board meeting. It's probably one of very few that I have attended. And the reason being is because Carol is not notified when the pension board meeting is, which I'm hoping to rectify that with the pension board. But my question is to the city manager. He is the head of that board, and I was wondering why he never attends the pension board meeting. He hasn't, from my understanding, he hasn't attended just maybe a few in the 2 years that he's been here. As a retiree, I have some questions for the city manager reference the pension, and I would hope would behoove him to attend the pension board meetings, so that if retirees do attend and they have questions, they can ask questions of the city manager. Also, the finance director does not attend the pension board. Again, if retirees have questions for the finance director, he's not there to answer the questions. Now, I do know that Emily, I believe whenever she was interim city manager, she did attend a few of the pension board meetings, from my understanding. But again, I'm just, I guess, shocked to know that the city manager does not attend them. The last pension meeting I did attend, the city manager was there, and that was the last city manager, Mr. Brake. And the finance director was there. So those are my two questions to the city manager. And I would hope that in the future he would attend the pension board meetings. So again, if retirees have questions, we can ask. The other one is, I believe I gave some information the last meeting about Weirton PD. Actually, Weirton PD officers are paid $25 an hour, not $23 an hour, along with the $2,000 signing bonus. And I would like to reiterate that how pathetic and sickening it is for a Mountain Line bus driver to make 62 cents less an hour than a starting patrolman with the City of Morgantown Police Department. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Is there any other member of the public wishing to address council?
Greetings, my name is Matthew Cross. I live at 524 Milford Street in Morgantown. I am chairman of the Pedestrian Safety Board, and I want to express my support for the words spoken by Chief Engineer Davis, Staff Engineer Gatlin on this plan. For the past 15 years, a lot of us have worked very hard in trying to get some infrastructure improvements with pedestrian safety, and I think we are starting to see some results, and I'm very happy about it. 2019, as he stated, the plan from Alta was produced, and we were looking forward to gaining some momentum with that. Unfortunately, COVID hit, which I experienced 2 weeks ago, still suffering from some of the symptoms, and it really knocked a lot of us out of whack with community meetings, community outreach, planning, and so forth. So at this point in time, as Mr. Gatlin stated, I think it's important for us to adapt to what we have, our current situations. We have the DOH putting a lot of money in projects coming into Mon County, and it's important for us to get it coordinated. In the past, we have seen that not the case, but at this point, we're getting some oversight on it, and Mon County is going to grow. That's why the DOH is here. And I think we can come up with appropriate plans for city infrastructure that we can control to work with. A few years back, we got some infrastructure improvements on the north side, which I live in Suncrest, Baldwin Street at the Suncrest Middle School, and 8th Street in Evansdale. That is now in place, and so the proposals for addressing the south side of town, I think, are right in line with a citywide infrastructure improvement plan. One thing I will say, my compliments to Chief Engineer Davis, specifically 2016 when we initiated the Safe Streets and Communities fee, also known as a service fee. I asked Mr. Davis about some sidewalks. First thing he said he wanted to do was build ADA ramps, curb cuts throughout Central City and around town. And at that point, I think we have over 200 of them at this point in time, possibly more. So I think that was a great initial use of the service fee. I know funding is hard to come by at this point in time, but whatever we can come up with this, we know that, as Mayor Celine stated, sidewalks do last for decades. So in the future, we can experience some of this development immediately, such as we see, but we know that people who visit and live in Morgantown in the future will have some decent walkways to walk on. So my thanks to the Public Works Department, Chief Engineer Davis, Staff Engineer Gatlin, and all of you for your help. Rapid Response Team, MPO, Bill Austin. We've got a good group of communication going on here, and I think we're making some progress. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Cross. Anyone else wishing to speak? No? That will bring us into the next portion of our meeting, which are items for discussion. Item A, it's a long one. Discussion and consideration of placement on agenda for City Council official action of an ordinance of City Council, which would authorize and approve the conveyance of property by the city to the Morgantown Building Commission in connection with the design, acquisition, construction, furnishing, and equipping of improvements to certain recreational facilities of the city, including renovation of the Morgantown Ice Arena and construction of a new swimming pool at Marilla Park, the leasing of the property associated with the projects and any additional property that may be required in connection with the financing of the projects by the city from the Building Commission pursuant to one or more lease agreements, the sale and issuance by the Building Commission of its not to exceed $29 million principal amount of lease revenue bonds in one or more series to finance all or a portion of the cost of the projects, to fund one or more debt service reserve funds if required, and to pay cost of issuance of the bonds and related costs. And the execution and delivery by the city of one or more lease agreements and other documents in connection with such financing. So, we have with us this evening, tonight, Rob Steptoe and Tom Amon, the bond counsel for Bow Park in the city of Morgantown. Do you all have information for us?
Good evening. Tom Amon with Steptoe and Johnson. We're the bond counsel for the issuance of lease revenue bonds by the Building Commission for the Ice Arena project and the Marilla Pool Park project. So we have Rob Steptoe here with Cruz and Associates, and we have Melissa Wiles with the Bow Park group that has put a lot of work into this. So we have sort of multifaceted parts of this that we can talk about. You know, as bond counsel, I sort of handle the legal and parts of the financial aspect. Rob from Cruz and Associates, they're the underwriters, so they help obtain the financing to pay for the cost of the project. And then, of course, Mel at Bow Park, they've been very involved in programming the project as to what the needs were and what's actually going to be built and the schedule, the budget for the cost of the project. So, and I know, or I hope you have a packet that includes some renderings of what the projects would look like. We've got schedules in place for this. We've got what I call numbers runs from that Cruz and Associates has generated that include the financial terms or the financial proposal. So so let's start off with procedurally what's happening. We've got two projects, and we're trying to approach this with one ordinance process with both the Building Commission and the city. So the Building Commission, as you may know I know we have some newer members of council, the Building Commission typically issues the financing obligations because they are permitted by state law to do that. The city's prohibited by the Constitution from incurring debt. So the Building Commission issues the bonds, owns the facilities that are financed, leases them to the city, and the city pays lease rentals under those leases that then repays the bonds. So that's essentially the legal structure and why the Building Commission is involved, and the city has a little bit different role. The Building Commission has started its process. It met today and approved the bond authorizing ordinance on first reading. They will have another meeting on, I think, the 1st, next Tuesday, and then November 15th, which will be public hearing and their final enactment. The city is only required to have 2 readings. It has its own ordinance, which does some different things, but that's only a 2-meeting process. So that'll be, or would be, if council decides to move forward, on the 1st and the 15th, the same, coinciding with the same schedule as the Building Commission. So the Building Commission's process and their ordinance is basically authorizing the issuance of the bonds and the main documents that would need to be signed in connection with that bond issue. The city and its ordinance is essentially authorizing the Building Commission to move forward with that process, and also, more importantly, authorizing the lease arrangement between the Building Commission and the city and the payment of these lease rentals that then repays the bonds. This could be done either as a public offering or a private placement. So with the public offering, Cruz and Associates we'd have this offering document that describes everything that's happening. Cruz and Associates would approach its investor group, offer this as a potential investment. Institutional investors and also some retail investors that might want to participate. And under those circumstances, the city has a rating that they have used from prior utility financings that will help the city obtain some better terms for this financing. We've looked into bond insurance. That's probably not feasible. So the avenue that's really going to help the city here with better terms is going to be this rating. City has a very good underlying rating. Rob can tell you more about that. Due to this lease arrangement, the city has to have the ability to cancel the lease on an annual basis. So because of that, the rating on the bonds will be slightly lower than the city's underlying rating. Still should be very solid. We're separating the 2 closings for these 2 projects. So there'd be one closing for the ice arena, one closing for the pool at Marilla Park. That's primarily because of the schedules that we're on for construction for the 2 projects. So the ice arena is farther along with design, and also as far as the need to bring the project online for use next winter, they really need to get started on that project in March. So, the bidding and the design will be completed. We would issue bonds sometime in February to get that project started in March. The pool project is going to take a little bit longer for design, and then we would, based on where we think we are currently, that project would go out to bid a couple months later and would put us to issuing bonds probably in April and starting construction in May. Then there's also, with the pool project, a demo component. So the demolition of the existing swimming pool facilities, and then that would then be repurposed for other uses. That's also would be financed from the bonds and part of the overall schedule. So both projects are, we have some preliminary numbers that are based on a maximum anticipated cost for the two projects, and Cruz has prepared numbers runs that show what the repayment of the bonds would look like. And so the city has also, as a companion to this, considering an amendment to its existing sales tax ordinance. So that would sort of more formalize how the funds are used from the city's municipal sales tax, setting aside certain buckets of monies that would be available for different purposes. Under that proposal, 25% of the city's municipal sales tax would be set aside for Bow Park and Bow Park bonds, related operating expenses, etc. So that 25%, when looking at the two bond issues, Rob can tell you is more than sufficient to cover the debt service on these bonds that would be anticipated, and also provide about $700,000 in addition to that of surplus monies that would be available for different Bow Park type purposes. So the Building Commission is moving forward with its ordinance. The city, if it were to decide to move forward, would have those two readings and the public hearing. We would take care of the publications for the city clerk. The public hearing would be on November 15th. You have the renderings in your packets as to what's contemplated with the programming from Bow Park. The estimated maximum cost of these projects right now with the ice arena is approximately $11.5 million, and with the aquatic center, $11 million. So similar in cost, so similar bond sizings for both of these. So both of the bond issues would look fairly similar, but again, separated for those reasons that we talked about. There would be also, as required for this type of financing, there would be a deed of trust or a lien that would be placed on each of the respective properties that are being financed. So the Building Commission would grant that lien as the owner of the property. The city really doesn't have the authority to grant liens on its property. So there would be, as customary for this type of financing, liens placed on both of these properties through a deed of trust that provides additional security for the bondholders to help get the best possible rate that we can. So there could be this public offering route that Cruz would pursue, or if it's looking more advantageous to do that, we can put together a package for a private placement that Cruz would approach different banks to potentially purchase these bonds. And if that's could be more advantageous to get the best terms for the city, then that will be explored. The ordinance is flexible to provide for both of those approaches. I'm sure there's lots of questions. That's the basic highlights of what's occurring. I'm happy to try to address any questions that you may have. And then Rob, again, from some of the financial aspects, and then Mel from as far as the programming for what's contemplated for these facilities. So just open it up to you guys for discussion at this point.
Does anyone have any specific questions for Tom, or would we like to hear from Rob and Mel first, or no specific questions, Tom?
Okay.
I guess.
Oh, hold on.
Oh, is there changing up?
One other thing to mention, the city on November 1st, this next meeting, if it wants to move forward with this, there's a reimbursement resolution as well. So there's the city ordinance that I talked about. There's a reimbursement resolution, and then there's the amendment to the sales tax ordinance, which is a companion to all this. The reimbursement resolution, if adopted by the city, just authorizes, once bonds are issued, if there are costs incurred related to this project that the city would then want to reimburse from the bond proceeds when those closings occur, the reimbursement resolution allows the city to do that. It's basically for federal income tax purposes, for tax-exempt bonds. So it's a mechanism to give the city some flexibility in that regard.
I just had a question about, or just wanted to reiterate that the pool would not be demoed until the end of the season. Just good to get that out there.
Not until we're sure
Absolutely.
the new pool is ready to go.
Yes.
That's the advantage of having two different sites, is you can
Yes.
wait.
It should be a seamless process for the pool goers at Marilla Park.
Right. That's it.
Thank you.
Okay. Rob, did you want to address anything? Or?
I think you really covered it really well, Tom. Sent some of the preliminary scenarios earlier, and if there are any questions with those, happy to address those or any of the method of sale options, but everything is on the table as far as a method of sale, and Tom covered those pretty well. We think that the city's rating, the issuer rating, is really going to be helpful because there's a really good story here for the city and the county, and the combination of all the economic development that's going on. So it was very good to get an issuer rating by the city a couple of years ago, and then we can work from that to get a rating on the bonds, hopefully. And we think that'll just be a notch or two below the AA3 rating that the city has, simply because of the lease revenue bonds and the right of not appropriating money annually to repay the debt service. That's never happened before in West Virginia. As far as anyone I've ever asked who would know has opined that there's never been a non-appropriation. Nevertheless, it's still sort of one of those things where it's a risk, and so they will notch the rating 1 or 2 lower, which is fine. You will still benefit from more efficient pricing if we go the rated bond route. And again, as Tom indicated, we could do this non-rated, or we could do this as a bank placement, because the city of Morgantown, as a credit, is stout, solid, strong, stable. And so you all have those options. You have a rated public offering, a non-rated public offering, and a bank placement. You have the option to go 30 years, 25 years, 20 years. So you really have a broad range of options when we finalize the structure. So, and you do not have to do that at this point. We've got plenty of time to zero in on everything before we would go into the market.
Okay. Any specific questions for Rob?
Just a timing question. I think it was January that we hope to try to secure bonds as we move forward.
I reached out, so it's sort of like everything is linked to the schedule for bidding, the first project, the Ice Arena project. And so I've gotten some feedback on that, and we're going to adjust the schedule a little bit. But it's not going to impact the start of construction in all likelihood, provided we stick to what they just indicated, which is they needed a week or two around the holidays, an additional week or two, which is understandable, to give the contractors ample time to really focus in on their proposals, but also to give the city a week or two once the bids come in, so that you all can work on looking at these bids, making any adjustments, and before you feel comfortable making an award on the bid. So all of that is, so the schedule originally had us, I think, closing on the bonds around February 9 or 10, somewhere in there. But we had 2 or 3 weeks in there built in already. So now we're projecting closing around March 1st. And that's okay because they can still, once the funds are closed, wired, and deposited into the project fund, then you can sign the construction contract. And then they move from there. And that'll be in March sometime, mid-March, 3rd week in March, somewhere in there.
Any other questions for Rob? No? Okay. Director Wiles, is there anything you would like to add?
Mostly, I would just like to thank council for considering this ordinance. Obviously, Park is very excited about the opportunity to improve community recreational facilities and engage in long-term planning and also accommodate additional needs we have within the Park system. In terms of programmatic opportunities at the ice arena, of course, we're looking at public skating, rental space for high school and college hockey, figure skating, and Park programming. Having a space in the summer that we can transfer to camp use and other activities athletics-wise is also a good thing. For the pool, public swim lessons, rental opportunities, water fitness, lap swim, all kinds of opportunities there. Any questions programmatically or anything else?
Questions, comments? Mayor?
One wonderful thing that I think sometimes we all don't realize or think about is the quality of the ice.
Mhm.
So when we're looking at the rink, throughout this process, this was not at all my specialty, although I like to ice skate, is the idea that when the envelope in the rink is created in a better way, that it can be drier inside the building, is that right?
That is part of it,
So
yeah.
you get better, climate controlled appropriately.
Exactly.
So that you get better quality of ice. So I think sometimes people are looking at other amenities and attributes to a rink, but I think that we've kept a nice focus on making sure that the quality of the slab of ice is high and taking out the underpinnings of what's there now, so we make sure that there isn't a whole new facility on a slab that has issues underneath, is another kind of important aspect. And it's not gonna be readily apparent to people using the rink, except that the ice will be in much better shape more or all the time.
Yes, the slab, the ice, and the mechanics are obviously the most important part of it. Dehumidification and temperature control and all of that goes into making that slab appropriate and something that people can depend on. You can't have a pool in the middle of an ice arena. Doesn't work. So.
Well, and another, just very quickly, important thing to note, this facility will have the capability of maintaining ice year-round, which we don't have right now.
Correct.
So in the future, if that's a need or a desire, or it's determined that that's sustainable for us, it will have the capability.
That is correct.
Even though that's not the current plan.
That is correct.
Just good to be clear on these things, there, people.
Any other questions for Melissa, Tom, Rob? No? Is there a general consensus to move the first ordinance, item A, that I am not going to read again, to our future agenda?
Yes.
I'd like to move for that. Go, Bill. Bill's moving, I'm seconding.
We don't actually vote, we just consent.
Oh, yeah, we're consenting. I'm just consenting. I'm used to that voting thing.
Great. So they've already kind of discussed item B, I will read it. Discussion and consideration of placement on an agenda for City Council official action of a reimbursement resolution which would authorize the reimbursement from proceeds of lease revenue bonds to be issued by the Morgantown Building Commission of certain costs related to the design, acquisition, construction, furnishing, and equipping of improvements to certain recreational facilities of the city, including renovation of the Morgantown Ice Arena and construction of a new swimming pool at Marilla Park that may be paid by the city or the Board of Park and Recreation Commissioners of Morgantown, West Virginia, prior to the issuance of such lease revenue bonds. Tom already discussed this, but Tom's gone. So if there's any other questions, I'm sure Rob or Ryan would be happy to answer.
I think they covered it.
So generally, you have a question?
No, I was gonna
okay.
say,
Generally
I was
move this to the agenda. It's an accompanying
Yep.
ordinance.
Oh, yeah.
And this just allows Bow Park to recoup some of the costs that we are paying currently. All right, that'll bring us to item C. Discussion and consideration of placement on agenda for City Council, official action of an ordinance of City Council, which would amend Article 733 of City Code regarding the city's sales and use tax. Ryan.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. This is the companion update to the sales tax ordinance that Tom mentioned when discussing the bond proceeds available, or rather the sales tax proceeds available to Bow Park to fund the debt service on the bonds proposed to be issued. When City Council initially adopted its sales tax ordinance, all of the proceeds of the sales tax were deposited into a special revenue fund. That's a requirement so that you can issue bonds that are potentially backed by a direct pledge of sales tax revenue. That's not what we're doing with this transaction, but the sales tax is still the or repayment of debt service obligations, bond funds like you've been talking about tonight. Another 25% is allocated to reducing the unfunded actuarial accrued liability of the city police pension fund and firefighter pension fund. Also includes the opportunity for debt service obligations. And third, 25% of the funds are allocated for the purpose of capital improvement projects within the city and debt service on those projects, with the remaining funds available for supplementation of all of those funds and general funds as council determines is needed. So those specific allocations, I think, help with your bond proposals. They also give your organizations, your administration, some more certainty in planning for the future. And I believe they track how council has allocated these funds for the past couple of budget years. So it's more a formalization of a practice that's been in place and is consistent with how the city's currently using those funds. If you have any questions, I'll be happy to address those. One stylistic point, you'll see the entire ordinance is underlined. This is styled as a repeal and replacement of the entire ordinance. All the language is new.
Questions?
Move to the agenda.
General?
Yep.
All right. Item D, ordinance amending section 129.05, purchasing procedures. Attorney Simonton.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. This is an update to section 129.05 of the city code, which the city has used to adopt its centralized purchasing as authorized by West Virginia Code 8-12-10. These updates make the language a bit more clear, providing a clear separation between government construction projects, which are for the most part governed by West Virginia Code Chapter 5, Article 22, but also have some local provisions for initiating a project and setting notice conditions. Those are now directed to be initiated by the finance director. Separate process for competitive bidding for the purchase of goods described by 8-12-10. Those now also include a specific bidding process that includes a Class 1-0 legal advertisement. So every time there will be a notice published in the paper. This is again something that we commonly do already, but is now formalized. And also for any competitive bidding provides for common exceptions to those practices where they just don't make sense. There's an exception section in the document. Those exceptions are the same as are included in the Code of Federal Regulations for purchases with federal funds and within the city's own existing administrative purchasing policy. So it will coordinate the rules that are specifically set out and hopefully make life a little easier for the finance department. The ordinance also defines cooperative purchasing, which is allowed as an alternative to competitive bidding when cities have chosen to use that, and let cities purchase through cooperative agreements with other local government agencies or through a state purchasing contract. We suggest you move it to the agenda.
Questions, discussion, comments?
Sounds like a good thing to have.
Agree.
We'd like to have modern purchasing. And get it all in writing.
I'm seeing a lot of head nodding, so move to agenda.
Yes.
Yes, please.
Item E, ordinance amending section 121.24, applicability of Robert's Rules of Orders. Attorney Simonton, that's you again.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. This is just a procedural update to your code. City Council has a lot of procedural rules in Article 121, and one of those says that City Council will follow Robert's Rules of Order, but a lot of those other sections have procedural rules for council, and often smaller groups like City Councils really would have difficulty following the procedures under Robert's Rules, which are set up for larger bodies and are a bit more formal than the way we usually operate our meetings. There's a designated person who decides questions of order already in your rules. That's the chair of the meeting. So this change provides that Robert's Rules will be used as a guide, but if there are conflicting ordinance provisions or separate rules adopted by council for its procedure, that those would prevail.
And what would the conflicting ordinance provisions be? Do you have any specific examples?
Sure. Section or Article 121 rather provides for things like calling for division of a question or the precedence of certain motions for conducting council business, calls for a decision on questions of order by the chair and then referral to the body for a vote if a member appeals it. So there is some kind of more basic procedural provisions that also we don't often have occasion to use in our council meetings, but they're already supplied directly in the code.
And these are all in section 121?
Article 121, they are, yeah, they're kind of spread throughout there. Let's see.
And if there's already, like, changing the order of the meeting, wasn't that another example?
Well, that's a different section we're looking at.
Yes.
If there's already a if it's already stated that a certain person acts as the deciding person, I don't understand why we would change this instead of like doing away with it if it's already spelled out elsewhere, but you're saying there's another section of Article 121 that says that the chair of the meeting is the deciding.
Yeah, that's 121.07 and 121.10. Council is perfectly welcome, of course, to continue without adopting this ordinance, but the provisions of Robert's rules are pretty detailed. They're not commonly observed in council meetings. It doesn't really reflect how your business is done. So that's the purpose of bringing the ordinance forward, is to conform the city code to how council is conducting its business.
Would this change any of how we conduct our meeting?
I don't believe so.
Provide more flexibility?
Right. I think what this would do is conform the code to how your meetings are conducted. Nobody's, for instance, waiting to be recognized by the chair here to ask someone a question, or voting to suspend the rules before letting your staff rather than the council members participate in the debate. And that's, under certain conditions anyway, that's pretty commonly how you conduct a meeting, and with a small group rather than with a 50-person body. It generally works pretty well as long as everybody's operating in good faith. But there's no, other than maybe technical non-compliance, there's no harm in not updating it.
Anyone?
I'm fine to move this to
Yeah.
the regular meeting agenda.
Anyone on my right?
In all
Yeah,
the
would
in
be
all the
second.
in all the training that we've had with Robert's rules, with the municipal league, for example, we've always been told that it's a good guideline, that you need not adhere to the strict interpretation of Robert's rules. And I think for the most part, our counselor has told us it is correct. The way we conduct business is a little less formal. However, it's always handy to have Robert's rules around just to keep us out of trouble. So as long as it's not completely thrown away and we're not in conflict with any of our charter, I have no problem with this. Just give us a little latitude. It seems like we're doing an awful lot of housekeeping and sweeping away the cobwebs. So let's, I guess, keep it up.
I have a lot more reading I would like to do before a vote, but we can put it on an agenda. Item F, ordinance amending section 121.04, order of procedure. Attorney
Thank you, Deputy
Simington.
Mayor. So this is a similar, in a similar vein. This is housekeeping, and we try to do that with our code as regularly as possible. Keep things updated with state laws and with our current city practices. Section 121.04 prescribes by ordinance an order of procedure for council meetings. That order of procedure doesn't cover all the things you might have, even things that are provided in the code elsewhere, such as a consent calendar, which council does now use sometimes. It often includes things that council would not take up at a meeting, so changing that section to say instead that the order of procedure will be as prescribed on the agenda published by council, subject to council's right to amend that, within the bounds of the Open Governmental Proceedings Act, will make the city code comply with your actual practices.
So, question. So, part of the idea behind having an order of the meeting was to make sure that the public portion was always before we would vote. Unfinished businesses before that, but that always has a public hearing attached to it. So this is a good sort of guideline or general order of our meetings. Does this get preserved anywhere? I mean, it's preserved in a gazillion sets of minutes, so that we keep a general order of the meeting?
Well, I would presume that your agendas won't change substantially.
That's what I'm thinking.
When they include something like a consent agenda, that won't be in violation of the ordinance, or if they were to not include something where you didn't have correspondence for some
Yeah.
reason. They also wouldn't be, the proposed ordinance change provides that the council rules would be the place where the order of procedure is generally prescribed. So if the city council were to take up and adopt rules for procedure of its meetings, that's often where I see city councils adopting something like this, an order of procedure for the meetings, rather than in the codified ordinances.
So this also changes the structure or where different things might go in the future.
Right, the proposed ordinance provides that council may set its procedure by rules. Now, council has only adopted meeting rules by various separate resolutions. We have presented in the past a proposal to sort of consolidate those, but we don't have those in place at this time.
Good, thank you. I'd move it the heck to the agenda.
General consensus?
Yeah, sure.
Okay, that brings us to our final item of the night. Would anyone like to move us into executive session?
Pursuant to West Virginia Code Section 6-9A4B12 to discuss potential or pending litigation and matters protected by attorney-client privilege.
Second. Are we moving to the back room or are we staying there?
I think we should move.